Hey, welcome back to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 748. Please hit the like button as you come in, share the video if possible, and hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust. Also, make sure you check the community tab for any new exclusive postings. So, I wanted to get into a topic tonight that has been brewing the last maybe couple years or so, but more recently in the last 90 days. 2022 was the midterm election in the United States for where you had congressional and Senate seats be challenged. And what happened in the black male space that we call the black manosphere, you had a lot of people who were riding against certain candidates because they were in certain political parties. And everyone is entitled to their own prerogative. But what happens here is certain people will ride for the wrong reasons while being in the same space of black men collectively going against their best interests. So I wanted to play someone's clip tonight, Ron O'Neill, and really delve into the ways of knowing and the thought processes that certain black men get into that actually can be harmful to the space. So without further ado, what I'll do here is share my screen. And let's play his presentation.
Tonight, okay? And this evening around the Republican Party. And someone about the Republican Party is because we are at a very, very important transition point. We are in a very, 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 very important transition point. And there are a lot of questions that are in the air. There is a lot of tension that is in the air. There's a lot that is going on that demands that we talk about all of our options, that we talk about all of our options, all the options that are on the table. Uh, Listen, guys, when I came on YouTube 2 years ago, the first video that I placed on YouTube two years ago, was a video that dealt with Killer Mike, and this happened back in 2020. This happened when we were dealing with that serious moment in the history of the United States, where the presidency of Donald Trump was basically placed under a moratorium. His challenger was Joe Biden. So you had Trump and you had Pence, you had Biden, you had Kamala Harris, and what have you. And and at that time, that is when I, began posting here on YouTube. And I came out as a full supporter of Killer Mike, who is in the state of Georgia. Killer Mike is in Georgia. If you guys have not been paying attention to what's going on in Georgia, I need you guys to really pay attention to the governor race in Georgia. You all know that in 2018, Stacy Abrams, who was once a state representative within the Georgia legislature, she went up against Brian Kemp, all right, who was, I believe he was the Secretary of State within the governor, the Georgia legislature, and they were competing for the gubernatorial position there in the state of Georgia. And we know the history of that. Stacey Abrams did not win that situation. Okay, so you fast forward 2 years later to 2020, we're in COVID 19. We're dealing with the pandemic, and people are locked in. We're dealing with the pandemic. Businesses are having to shut down and what have you. People are dealing with financial issues and crises and everything. And at that particular time, Killer Mike, who a rapper, an entrepreneur, an intellectual, a Pan Africanist, an activist, he is so many things. Killer Mike went to the governor, the Republican governor of the state of Georgia, with concerns about business, particularly black businesses and what have you, and black businesses being able to benefit from government resources, money from the government, so that they could keep their businesses afloat during the pandemic. And Killer Mike was met with a great deal of hostility. He was met with a great deal of criticism from people from the liberal side, from the feminist side, some of the left, not all of the left, but mostly the criticism came from the liberals and the feminists and what have you, because they just felt that he engaged in some abominable act by talking to a Republican governor about business. And at that particular time, 2 years ago, you can go back. I didn't get a whole bunch of views on that video, and that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But that was my start. One of my early, that was part of the early video productions that I made on YouTube, and I used my computer. It wasn't full of graphics, and it didn't have a thumbnail or anything like that. It was basic. It was minimal, kind of like the style I've had. My style up to this point has been basically a minimalist style. It's a minimalist style. Okay, that's my minimalist style. Okay, and I've said to you guys before, and I've said to you repeatedly, that I just don't have the time. I don't have the patience. I don't have the energy. My book demands more energy than editing. Okay, dealing with government, dealing with power, dealing with state power, dealing with federal power, and that is to deal with whoever is in power. You deal with whoever is in power. You don't play this immature game. This is an immature game where the only people that you deal with are the people who belong to the so-called political party that you are affiliated with, the political party that you find on your voter registration card. You don't just deal with them. You deal with whoever is in power. So if you're an independent like me, I'm an independent. I vote independent right now. I'm going to deal with whoever is in power, be it a Democrat person in power or a Republican power. So it's not about party affiliation. It's about who is in power and who can create change on your behalf. The other thing, my guys, is this, is that we cannot play a game where we think that one party has a monopoly on virtue and goodness and justice over against another party. We cannot play a game where we think, and this is what black people err, what black people have erred, when you think that the only people who can be effective, the only people who can advocate on your behalf, and these are black Democrats now, black Democrats, the only people who can advocate on your behalf are Democrats, other Democrats. So if you're talking about economics, if you're talking about healthcare, if you're talking about education, if you're talking about whatever, it doesn't matter what you're talking about, you only channel those concerns through a Democratic person. And this is a fool's errand. This, my guys, is a fool's errand. You don't do that. The reason why you don't do that is because there are people who are on the other side. Yes, there are Republicans on the other side who can be effective in championing your cause. Matter of fact, there are people on the other side who are sympathetic. They're even empathetic to your cause. They're
I'm letting this play because I don't want to interrupt him, but keep this in mind going forward.
sympathetic and they're empathetic to your cause. And if you engage them in the appropriate way, you can sway them to be an advocate for you. Okay? Okay? And you do that by aligning your interests with their interests. There's a marriage between interests, a marriage between interests. And Killer Mike understood that back in 2020 when he talked to Brian Kemp. Killer Mike was concerned about what was happening with the businesses, the businesses, black business class. And I want to emphasize that. I want to emphasize that. Concerned about those who are in the world of creating jobs, those who are in the world of making money, creating resources and all that sort of things, people who keep the economy afloat, people who keep the economy afloat, okay? All right? Killer Mike is not Killer Mike is not an anti. He is not an anti-capitalist. He is not somebody who is just out here saying that we just need to destroy capitalism and what have you. He's not one of those people. Okay. Killer Mike understands. Now, having said that, Killer Mike understands that capitalism does have some problems, and capitalism it does. There are problems that are connected to capitalism. For this reason, that is why Killer Mike attached himself or aligned himself with Bernie Sanders. He did that. He did that in 2016, and he also did that in 2020. But the point is that capitalism matters, money matters, jobs matter, all those things matter. Okay, and so Killer Mike did that. Killer Mike did that. But not only, but not only did Killer Mike do that, our brother, thank you, Shocks 112. Thank you, Shocks 112. We are treating political parties like religion instead of agility for our interests. Absolutely. We are treating political parties like religion instead of agility for our interests. Absolutely, 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 absolutely. You're absolutely right. Not only did we have the figure of Killer Mike come forward with this type of mentality, but we also had Ice Cube. Y'all see this? Do y'all see it? Shocks 112. You see this? I got you, Shocks 112. Y'all see this? Y'all see my shirt? I'm wearing this shirt for a reason, guys. I am wearing this shirt for a reason. I am
What's that reason?
wearing this shirt for a reason. It was not only Killer Mike who operated in this fashion, it was also Ice Cube. Ice Cube did this, and he did this with his contract. The contract, contract with Black America, the contract with Black America. Ice Cube, and I'm wearing this shirt deliberately on this stream because both Killer Mike and Ice Cube both of them represent BMI, Black Men's Independence. BMI, Black Men's Independence. Ice Cube sat down with the reparations people. Ice Cube sat down with the ADOS people in California. Ice Cube sat down with the economists. He sat down with Derek Hamilton. Derek Hamilton is a Black economist who works at the New School of Social Research in New York City. Ice Cube sat down with experts. Ice Cube sat down with people who have spent their lives studying Black people's in the Black people's economic precarity, the disparities, the wealth gap, and all that kind of stuff. Ice Cube didn't just bring this stuff, pull a plan out of his rectum. Okay, he didn't just do that.
Okay. So two people he has named so far. Ice Cube and Killer Mike. Supposedly people were talking. A whole lot of talking was going on. Killer Mike went to Brian Kemp, but what came of it? Ice Cube talked to Derek Hamilton, contract with Black America, but what came of it? Let's keep listening.
Ice Cube took time with people because he was concerned about the condition of Afro Americans, all African Americans, and he had this contract. And Ice Cube, as a Black man who's lived his life as a Black man, like many of us, was frustrated with where we are politically. And Ice Cube, under the auspices of BMI, he took his contract and he courted, or he attempted to court, Joe Biden's camp, the camp of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and the camp of Donald Trump and Mike Pence. He courted both of those camps. And the only camp among those two camps, guys, who were responsive to Ice Cube, and Ice Cube did not care about political party, he did not care about affiliation. He said that this contract of America was something that transcended political parties, and what he needed was bipartisan. He needs bipartisan support for this. And this is the same thing with reparations. Reparations, if Black Americans are ever going to get reparations in the United States in relationship to these political parties that dominate the landscape, Black Americans are going to need bipartisan support. If reparations were to be passed right now, it would have to be supported by both Democrats and Republicans. They would have to pass it. They would have to support it. A president would have to put it forward, and Congress and everything, they would have to give it a stamp of approval.
Okay, so show me the Republicans that's going to support that reparations bill. We're still waiting for it. Renaissance man, you got anything you want to add to this?
Nah, what's up, Mike?
What's up, man?
The one thing I've always that people miss with the whole Ice Cube situation is political novices. When you look at the plan, you basically see that a lot of it is read out of another plan. There's no way he sat down with an economist and they came up with this, off the cuff like this. This is something that they borrowed from other existing plans and then sort of repackaged. The other thing that was missing in this was the political strategy was missing. Ice Cube came with this contract with Black America, probably a few months before the election. It really the lack of strategic building. Because here's the thing, all the stuff that is in there, that's not something Biden can get done. Biden can't wave a magic wand and say, okay, all these things are passed. It showed the ignorance of the political process. These are things if you're gonna move within the current framework, you're gonna have to basically have people who are basically lobbying throughout the year, meeting with different members of Congress, explaining the bill to them. There's a whole process of how like major corporations lobby. They basically have government affairs teams that are there all the time, meeting with people, helping them understand, legislation, what the impacts are, all of those things. And this was just sort of, hey, we'll vote for you and we'll get this. And that's not quite how it works.
Exactly.
So Ice Cube exercised BMI, okay? And he did this in the face, and here's the thing, he did this in the face of all the vitriol and all the animus that was surrounding Donald Trump and Donald Trump's presidency, okay? Donald Trump's presidency and all the baggage that came with Trump's presidency, okay? Now, Donald Trump is important for this particular moment. Donald Trump is important for this moment, 2022, and he is also important for 2020. And let's even go back to 2016. Let's even go back to 2016 with Donald Trump. Donald Trump, who for most of his career as a businessman who lived in New York, here's the thing, Donald Trump was a Democrat, a New York Democrat, who basically became an independent who campaigned through the Republican Party. Donald Trump was not a traditional Republican, but Donald Trump went over to the Republican Party. He was not a traditional Republican. Donald Trump was not. Y'all go back and y'all check out Donald Trump's history. He was not a traditional Republican.
That's exactly what MAGA is, a Republican in name only. You just articulated everything that's wrong with Trump as a reason to align yourself with Trump because of that importance. Can't make this up. Renaissance man, you got anything you want to add?
No, keep going.
So he thought a little bit different than the Republicans. And because he was not a traditional Republican, he saw things a little different from the Republican Party. And one of the things that he saw different from the Republican Party was the black male vote. I want y'all to get this down. I want y'all to get this down. Donald Trump was not a traditional Republican. He was not a politician. Remember, Donald Trump ran as an anti-politician. That's what Donald Trump ran as. Donald Trump talked about draining. We're going to drain the swamp. We're going to drain the swamp. We're going to drain the swamp. That's Donald Trump. We're going to drain the swamp.
And what did he do? He filled it up with alligators. That's what he did. He drained the swamp, filled it up with alligators, and they tried to overthrow the damn Capitol. That's what happened.
And when he talked about the swamp, he wasn't just talking about the Democratic Party. Now, the swamp for him was mainly the Democratic Party. That was the main part. That was the main swamp he was talking about. But it wasn't just the Democratic Party. The swamp had to do with the Republican Party. The swamp had to do with many members or factions within the Republican Party, which he felt need to move on, or they need to recede into the background. So Donald Trump did not operate as number one, he did not operate as a traditional politician in general, having never held office whatsoever, no office whatsoever, no office at the local level, no office at the state level. I mean, not even a state senator, not a mayor of a city or anything like that. None of that stuff. Okay. He just bypassed the U.S. Senate. He bypassed being a governor and what have you. And as a part of his non-traditional style, as a part of Donald Trump's non-traditional style, he made outreach to Black America. I want y'all to remember this. I want y'all to get this, and I want y'all to remember this. Donald Trump made outreach to Black America. The world, MSNBC can say whatever they want to say about Donald Trump. CNN can say whatever they want to say about Donald Trump. NPR can say whatever they want to say about Donald Trump. But there is one thing that they cannot take for Donald Trump, is that Donald Trump was the first United States presidential candidate. This is before he became president now. He was the first United States presidential candidate in recent memory, and I dare say that he was the first presidential candidate in ever to specifically speak to Black people, specifically, and to tell Black people.
Wait. Is he really trying to say when Trump said, "What do you have to lose"? That's what he's saying, speaking to Black folks?
That's the only thing I can assume, because I don't remember a conversation. I mean, okay, maybe you talked to Jim Brown and
Kanye West.
No, what's the comedian? Steve
Harvey.
Steve Harvey, right? Is he talking to Black America, or is he talking to the comedians?
The Steve Harvey thing was actually after Trump got in the White House too. I remember that because he got a bunch of backlash for going up there. But I don't see. First of all, I mean, there have been plenty of presidential politicians who have spoken to Black America. I mean, yeah, Obama spoke to Black America. I would argue Johnson definitely spoke to Black America. Clinton spoke to Black America. I mean, most of your Democratic presidents did. you could even make the argument.
Reagan.
What's up, Gwen?
No, I was going to say, previous president before Reagan, Jimmy Carter was a staunch advocate with the Black community.
Yeah, and I was even going to say, you could even make the argument somewhat with Bush too, in the sense of maybe not speaking directly, but putting Condoleezza Rice and Colin Powell in his cabinet positions. Even had Alfonso Saylor over Department of Education. Actually, Bush administration, for all the flack it caught, and I'm not by any means a fan of it by any way, but it was actually a relatively diverse cabinet that he had.
Mm-hmm.
Most people, I mean, like I said, it's far in the political memory right now. It seems like a different universe, but most people really don't realize that.
Yeah. You can go back to, I thought, Nixon's whole entire idea behind this new capitalism thing in the 60s was aimed to Black people. So what do you mean capitalism. This is the first time a president has ever tried to engage the Black community? What part of history is this, man?
Like you said, he said recent history. So I guess, a lot of these guys, hey, if it happened after, the year 2010, they act like nothing happened before politics started then for a lot of these people, unfortunately.
It was his first video, according to him. All right, let's keep going.
That your political affiliations have failed you. They have failed you. Donald Trump looked at cities like Baltimore, Maryland. He looked at the horrible Democratic leadership in Baltimore, Maryland. He looked at the boroughs in New York City, the Bronx, Queens.
But wait a second here. Why didn't Trump go over to the the conservative states and look at the blight there? What about West Virginia, with people's teeth falling out of their mouth and bad healthcare and no clean drinking water? What about all the poor white people in Alabama and rural Alabama who have septic tanks that are broken and backed up and they're basically living on top of raw sewage? What about Mississippi in the water crisis there? What about Flint, Michigan? How come you're not talking about this though?
Well, the thing is with Trump and the whole Baltimore thing, and it was pointed out by some people at the time, like those are his constituents too. You're the president. Like when you win the presidency, you're not just like the presidents of Republican states or Republican counties. Like you're the president of the United States. So if you had all this concern for Baltimore, why didn't you go there? It was right down the street. I mean, why didn't you go and visit? Why didn't you tout your own opportunity zones there? Why didn't you set up like a presidential study or a commission or something? All the guy really did was say that it was what did he say? It was invested, something like that. That's pretty much all he did was say it was invested and move on from there. And his his son-in-law owned several buildings that were not even up to code in Baltimore. So at least you could have said, hey, can you at least bring those buildings up to code so residents don't have rats and stuff like that in their homes. So it was the least. It was a cynical. It was cynical. It was low key paternalism, elements of racism. That's the extent of Trump, talking to these Black communities.
Harlem, Brooklyn. He looked at Atlanta. He looked at Oakland. He looked at Chicago. He looked at Chicago. He looked at Chicago. He looked at Chicago. He looked at Chicago, and he said, "These Democrats have utterly failed you." And what did he say to Black people? What did he say? Donald Trump looked at Black people directly and honestly and says, "What do you have to lose? Voting for me or vote for me. What do you have to lose?"
That's the conversation. That's the conversation. I thought this was like, a sit down, with Al Roker or something like that, or, Ted Koppel or something like that, some kind of deep, sentimental conversation. This guy asked one question: what do you have to lose? That's a conversation.
Not even a black town hall.
Yeah.
This party, these people, i.e., the Democrats, have not done anything for you. They have contributed to your situation, the worsening of your situation over the decades. We're talking about 2016. We're talking about at the height of all the protests and all the Black Lives Matter stuff like that, everything. What you got to lose? What do you have to lose? That's what Donald Trump said to black people in general. And no presidential candidate under the banner of the Republican Party had ever spoken to black people in that capacity.
This is a lie, right?
Wait, did he change it up? He said no president on the Republican Party has ever done it.
Yeah.
Oh, so see, earlier he was saying no president has done it, period. Now he's saying no Republican has done it, which I would argue I disagree then, because I'm sure if you go back to Reconstruction, that period, the period prior to the 60s when black people were voting Republican.
Yeah.
So I mean, it still doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense at all. It doesn't have any real grounding or factual citation that you can actually follow up on. There's nothing there. It's a nothing burger, so let's move on, man.
And you know what? I can't hate that style. I can't hate it. I look back at it, I'm like, you know what? That makes it makes sense to me. They're not gonna vote for you anyway, so why you gonna go over there and spend time with them? Also, you really don't need a vote to win. And George Bush didn't need the vote. George Bush didn't need the black vote in order to become president a second time. Didn't need black folk. Let me get these super chats up.
Go ahead, Brandon Hans.
No. I was gonna say the problem with that is true, but at the same time, what they've benefited from is when black community does not turn out to vote, they win by de facto as well. And I'd argue what you're seeing more was the changing demographics, because I think Bush left office in 2008.
Changing of the guard, yeah.
And his last election was 2004. We're talking about something that's almost a decade ago. You know how much the demographics in this country have shifted in the past decade. So what you're seeing growing interest, and the reason people like him are even using this rhetoric is because Republicans are in a place where they can't just rely on the white male vote or white vote in general. It's they've got to either get more Hispanics to vote for them, more black folks to vote for them. One of those more women. One of those major demographics is going to have to break their way with the way the demographics are trending. So this idea that, hey, they don't need you, I disagree, and they really can't afford for you to be energized and turned out. Imagine if Black America turned out every election like they did in 2008. That the Republican Party would be sunk. Yeah,
it'd be obsolete. And I think they did an autopsy in 2010 and said, where did we go wrong? And started looking for answers. So let's go to continue on.
Up in here. Thank you, Shot 12, for another one. Shot 12 said that Trump is straight up with black with straight up with BLM. He said all this stuff, the newly arrived LGBTQ alliance against black men, people are fearful that black men are the wild card. You're absolutely right, brother. You are absolutely right.
Where is this alliance? I didn't see this alliance. I mean, I know I travel, quite a bit during this time, but I don't remember, this sort of alphabet alliance working against black men in the Democratic Party. I don't know when this happened. I'd like to see a citation to this.
Right, my brother. Thank you for that. You are absolutely right. You are absolutely right. One among many reasons why Republicans don't do any real outreach to black people. That's one among many reasons, because they don't need black people to win elections. They just don't. Okay. But Donald Trump was the first Republican president that we know of on record in recent years who really talked to Black people in a very, very honest way. And I say it was brutally honest. And you will never forget that question. What do you have to lose? He talked to Black people like a businessman. That was a capitalist response. What do you have to lose? These people ain't doing nothing for you. You might as well gamble. And that's what he was saying. We're gonna get on that. Donald Trump was basically saying you might as well gamble. You might as well gamble. You've had Democratic mayors, you've had Democratic Congress people, you've had Democratic governor. Well, not that many, but you've had Democratic representation. You've had Democratic presidents. Obama didn't do anything. I'm gonna say it again. Barack Obama.
This is this is untrue. This is untrue. This is a lie.
What? Correct. First of all, I don't think outside of Wes Moore, who's now governor of Maryland. Mm-hmm. Correct me if I'm wrong. There hadn't been a Black governor since like Reconstruction before him, right?
No, since Deval Patrick.
Oh yeah, he was governor in Massachusetts. Okay.
Deval Patrick, and then you had Doug Wilder before him.
Okay, but yeah, very few and far in between on the state level. Right. And then when you start talking about the mayoral level, some of the most successful cities are run by Black mayors. I mean, when you look at Atlanta and look at the list of mayors it had, most importantly, Maynard Jackson. Hartsfield Jackson Airport. The Jackson is named after him. He was the one who recruited Delta to Atlanta, busiest airport in the world. When you look at Marion Barry in DC, I know people are gonna, be upset about the whole crack thing, but he was elected as the best mayor in the country during his time there. David Dinkins in New York City, responsible for redeveloping Times Square, as well as bring down crime, as well as I believe it's the U.S. Open that's held up there, helping to recruit that event. When you look even currently, Houston, Sylvester Turner. I believe the mayor of Denver is Michael Hancock. I believe he's a Black man as well too. So I believe the mayor of Charlotte is also a Black woman. So I mean, I'm not getting where these mayors have failed you. People want to run to like a Baltimore and a Detroit and ignore some of these fastest growing metros and the Black mayors that they have.
Yeah, because it's a euphemism for. Republicans use it as a euphemism for nigger, to call out these cities that they're all, woke and nigger run cities. But in reality, if you look past the crime and look at the success rate, you see that there's a lot more success than there is not. And so it's easy to point out crime because it's such a blot on the screen. But when you actually go through the data, it doesn't reflect anything that this guy is saying. And so, it's all these Democrat-run cities, but if you really look at Republican-run cities like Little Rock, Arkansas, that place is a mess. Indianapolis, another mess, right? You go through Portsmouth, New Hampshire, another mess. All of these Republican-controlled areas, yet you get this sort of narrative that only Democrat-run cities are bad and everywhere else is good. And if we could just get rid of Democrats, society will be run so much better. But all of your key economic growth states are all run by Democrats. I'm not sure how you come to this conclusion.
Yeah. Oh, MOT's in the back.
Okay.
But the other thing too is people don't look at when you look at like causality as far as like crime in major cities. The reason big cities are always going to have issues with crime is that's where your opportunity is. That's where people are picking up, migrating to. That's where a lot of your immigrants, when they arrive to this country, they arrive in major cities. So people go there for opportunity. So by that very fact, you're going to attract people, you're going to attract crime because people are coming to you in droves. You get good and bad versus like, no one's moving to the middle of nowhere in droves. So of course there's not going to be a surge in crime, with that type of thing. Even though you are starting to see a surge in crime in rural America, ironically, because of deindustrialization and these these factories and things like that going out of business.
What's up, MOT?
Yeah, what's going on, man? And also, like, the Confederate South is totally Republican ran, and it always has been. I mean, we always talk about these Democrat ran cities, but we don't even talk about the conservative ran South. And it's almost like never even a talking point ever that anyone ever brings up. And it's like most of these people are here to just push misinformation and disinformation. Like they kind of stay hidden from view. Like this is the actual strength of them. It's never being challenged on their actual points and building an entire platform based off of political ignorance. I mean, if you just learn the actual history one time, there would be no reason to think that Donald Trump was the first elected president to do anything. I mean, he didn't come to Mississippi. He didn't go to Alabama. He didn't go to Arkansas. And these people voted for him. And it's like, where are they getting this information from? All these great things are happening, man. I don't get it.
It's all optics.
Yeah.
Obama didn't. What did Barack Obama do? Barack Obama didn't do anything.
Actually, this is a lie. Okay, the one thing Obama did do was he established PBIs, which are predominantly Black institutes that were geared structured around the advancement of Black men. So these were community colleges that had a majority Black enrollment that got funding for their advancement as a part of MSIs because they were largely left out. Because you didn't have HBCUs anymore, you now had to focus on predominantly Black institutions because predominantly white institutions were getting all of the bread, all of the resources. And so the way that you funnel resources into these predominantly Black institutions, you have to structure them through a bill that he did when he was in the Senate, and then it became fully established when he became president. And they pumped resources into these institutes. These are 2 and 4 year colleges. A lot of them were HBCUs, and then some of them were not HBCUs. So, like in Boston, in Massachusetts, in New England, the only one PBI that we have is Roxbury Community College. You're now starting to see money trickle into it long after Obama had left office, and a lot of advancement coming out of that was mostly specifically focused on the advancement of Black men.
Also, don't forget about Pell Grants. He expanded Pell Grants.
Yes.
That was a big thing.
Yes. Pell Grants, 75% of Black men who enroll in college rely on Pell Grants to get through school. Something that Trump, during his tenure, cut in 2020. Okay.
Yes, we did. Yeah, cut it.
As a part of tightening up the belt, all this social spending, get rid of Pell Grants, right? But Obama didn't do anything according to this guy.
Barack Obama said, I'm the president of everybody. Barack Obama said, I am the president of everybody. Black people are a part of everybody. Everybody. That's what he said when he got in office. I'm the president of everybody.
Wait. Stop for a second, Mike.
But then again, he was.
What in the world?
Isn't the whole I'm the president of everyone, isn't that equivalent to basically what conservatives say about a rising tide lifting all boats?
And wasn't he getting away from identity politics that they accuse the left of always playing?
Yeah, that's why I'm like, okay, y'all want to like say y'all are conservative and y'all want to, become part of Republicans. And I'm like, you get mad at someone saying, he's the president of everyone, and you want more identity politics, even though the right wants less. And, you get mad about essentially policies that are a rising tide lift all boats, which, Republican staple right there. It makes no sense.
A rising tide lifts all helmets. You got anything you want to add to that, MOT?
No, it's just that when you're talking to a bunch of politically ignorant people who don't know anything, the only thing they recognize is a check in their hand. Any other policy that don't really come and affect them directly, they'll never see because they're not trained to actually see those things. They're not trained to see it, but they show up with conversations like this, and then it makes our job harder for even actually explaining it. And then they're like, well, you know what, you must be a Democratic shield because you know what happened. But you're not a Republican shield for talking like this. never a Republican.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's people like him who then who don't recognize anything but a check in the hand. That's why Trump like held up those stimulus checks to make sure his name was signed on it, even though it's coming from the Treasury.
Yeah.
To get people like this.
Yep.
When it passed legislation for LGBT, when the LGBTQ people went to him, he didn't say, "I'm the president of everybody." And then the white women, they went to him, and the white women looked at him and all that kind of stuff. And when the white women looked at him and he talked to them, he didn't say, "I'm the president of everybody." He didn't say that to the white women, but to the black people, he was like, "I'm the president of everybody. I'm not a black president." Political liberals doesn't care about everybody else. You could be somebody who wasn't even born in the United States, and you are under this umbrella of generic blackness, which is flat blackness.
Let me lift this point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
That was the ADOS thing. That was all about. It's like, you know what? No, we are not all a part of the same thing. Generic blackness, it erases difference. It erases generic blackness. Generic blackness or flat blackness, it erases geographical differences among black people. It erases the whole notion of a black diaspora. That's what generic blackness says. There is no such thing as a black diaspora. Generic blackness says that the North American experience is not unique and it's not particular.
And they will be right. What do you think? The United States is the only place where slaves came to? 12% of the slaves that came out of the continent came to America, man. The rest of the slaves went down south. What are you talking about? What's this guy? I don't understand this perspective. There are the biggest demographic of people in the diaspora or descendants of slaves are in Brazil, in Latin America. There's what, 250 million of them down there? 300 million?
Yeah.
And you want to account 45 to 50 million black people as this sort of exclusive group to what? They weren't the only slaves. Slavery the United States is not the only place that had slavery.
Yeah. Nah. The other thing too, you can't forget about people who were in the Caribbean as well too, West Indies, all of those places as well. So it like I said, ignorance of history. And then the other thing when you brought up about gay marriage and Obama, the whole thing with gay marriage that was Obergefell. That was a court case. That was a Supreme Court case that legalized gay marriage essentially. That's why when you saw Roe v. Wade overturned, and Clarence Thomas said go back and look at Obergefell. He's essentially saying, hey, any court case, in his opinion, that was established through Supreme Court precedents should be looked at. And that's why it's now codified in law. It had nothing to do with what Obama did.
Right.
What happened in the United States is not something that is just unique or particular or whatever. We can extend it to black people all over the world. And I'll even go further. Generic blackness makes no distinctions in terms of class, what class you belong to. I'm going further now. Generic blackness
it's
makes
not
no
supposed to.
Class, you're lower class, you are working class, you are lower middle class, you are solidly middle class, you are upper middle class, or you are upper class. Generic blackness does not, it flattens it, it erases all these things. And I'll say this, it erases sexuality, then generic blackness erases sexuality, generic blackness erases gender.
I'm sorry, was this on the ballot?
Anywhere in the country? Anywhere in the country?
Yeah, was that on the ballot somewhere? I missed that. I wasn't sure if that was on the ballot in 2020. I know I traveled quite a bit during that time, but I don't remember that being on the ballot.
In many respects. flat blackness. There we go. We're talking about flat blackness. So let me tell you what Donald Trump and his people did. Y'all know Steve Bannon. You guys know who Steve Bannon is? Steve Bannon just got sentenced to 4 months in federal prison. Steve Bannon just got sentenced to 4 months in federal prison for being a part of the January 6th insurrection. Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon was Donald Trump's major strategist. He was his chief of staff. Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon is the person who was very instrumental in getting Donald Trump elected. He was the behind the scenes man. Steve Bannon was the behind the scenes man who was instrumental in getting Donald Trump elected. Matter of fact, Time Magazine put him on the cover. He was on the cover of Time Magazine shortly after Donald Trump was elected in 2016. Steve Bannon. He was the mastermind. Okay? You have to have masterminds. You have to have.
So he's the mastermind of getting him into office, but wasn't the mastermind of January 6th? I don't know, man. I don't know.
But you cite his accomplishments as he was the one who planned January 6th, but you don't list any accomplishments outside of him planning to overthrow the government.
Yeah.
You have thinkers. You have to have strategists. You have to have intellectuals behind movements and everything. I want y'all to keep it in mind. Keep that in mind when we talk about black men and we talk about the black manosphere. I'm telling y'all, I want y'all to keep that in mind.
Wait. So the black manosphere is full of strategists now?
No, it needs a strategist, basically. And Steve Bannon is the guy.
First of all, first before he has a strategist, you got to actually get people to, when they actually get on a public platform, you got to get them to actually say, "Hey, I'm part of the manosphere." Because a lot of these people, as soon as they get any sort of platform or they're confronted about it, they're like, "Nah, I'm not manosphere."
But let me tell y'all what Steve Bannon did. Steve Bannon has Breitbart. Some of y'all are familiar with Breitbart. Breitbart is his website, his company, his organization, his news media platform, and what have you. I'm going to tell you what Steve Bannon did. Steve Bannon, during Donald Trump's candidacy, Steve Bannon went to South Carolina. Steve Bannon went to South Carolina. Steve Bannon went to South Carolina. He went to Charleston, South Carolina. Steve Bannon went to South Carolina and he got together with some black men. He sat down. Y'all can Google this. Y'all Google this. Steve Bannon, Breitbart, and black men. He hooked up with Senator Tim Scott in South Carolina. And he had a conversation with black men in South Carolina.
Here we go.
That great swing state of South Carolina that holds up the presidential election every year. South Carolina.
White men sit down with black men. Here we go.
Steve Bannon sat down with black men in South Carolina and talked to black men about their issues. That's what Steve Bannon did. And Steve Bannon, when he sat down through Breitbart, that so-called right-wing organization or what have you, he sat down with those black men, and his conversation with black men that they posted on Breitbart became a part of Donald Trump's outreach to black men in 2016.
What do you have to lose? That was the conversation. What do you have to lose? Can't make this up.
Yeah, or maybe he also didn't look at the fact that a Democrat was never going to win South Carolina. Republicans are always going to win.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So I mean, now I'm talking to some black men, like, yeah, okay, I'm going through. I guess I'll stop and sit down with y'all. When we win, I'm pretty much going to ignore you because we all know, hey, you're not going to help me really carry this state. So what? It was a photo op, basically.
Yeah.
Very good, the photo ops, man. Steve Harvey. Yeah.
Yeah. A conservative selfie.
Yeah.
And Steve Bannon's outreach to black men in 2016 for that election was effective. It was effective. It was effective because he talked to a group of black men. He talked to black men who had been ignored. He saw that the Democratic Party, the political liberals, were ignoring a particular sector within black society. Steve Bannon is a white man. They call Steve Bannon. If you look at Time magazine, if you look at the liberal media would tell you that he's the devil. Steve Bannon is painted as the devil. He's the devil. They see him as the devil. The people at MSNBC, the people on CNN and NPR and everything like that. Again, he was a part of the January 6th thing. Steve Bannon is seen as the devil.
Because of what he did.
Let's just play with that. The devil made an outreach to black people.
So here we go.
He's happy about that.
Play with that. The devil did something that the other people didn't do. The devil deliberately sat down and talked to black men.
That's not a selling point. It's not a selling point.
Go ahead, Hamilton.
It's not a selling point to call him a devil and then he just sat down. Like, what happened? Like, okay, they sat down, they talk about this. What was the policy proposal? Like, you just can't say crazy things like this. You called him a devil over and over. And yeah, they call him that because of what he thought, what he said behind the scenes, what his actual plans were. And I was like, well, we sat down with the devil and we took a photo off. And that was never supposed to happen, folks. And I'm like, what is this dude talking about?
But here's the thing that's crazy. He is pumping up the fact that Steve Bannon sat down and took a photo op, or he sat down and had a meeting. Now, if Democrats just sat down and had a meeting with black men and did nothing, they'd be railing against this. That, in fact, that's the whole argument. Oh, Democrats, they pander to y'all, they don't do anything, they make promises, this and that. But then you want to turn around and hype up a meeting with a Republican? Like, it just makes no sense. It's like I said, one side of meeting is just like, political pandering means nothing. Next thing is like, oh wow, they sat down and had a meeting with us. They really care.
So Trump's team, with their Bannon model, they did that stuff all over the country. It was black men first, and then later on, they were talking to Latino men and what have you. But the point is that they wanted to do business with black men. And as a consequence, in that 2016 election, at least from most data, most polls, when it comes down to the black male vote, Donald Trump received 12%. 12% of his vote came from black men. The black male vote, 12%. Fast forward to 2020, I'm talking about he got 12% 2016. Fast forward to 2020, they maintain the same outreach. And Donald Trump gets 20%. in the final analysis, he gets 20%. That's a big leap from 12. And it might not, these numbers, guys, these numbers might, to some people, they don't seem humongous, but they're significant numbers. But the point that I want to make with all of this, is that these people demonstrated an openness. They demonstrated an openness to doing business with Black men in a way that doesn't exist among the liberals, the Democratic Party. It was an openness. It's kind of like the Mormons. Y'all guys, you know who the Mormons are? Y'all guys know who the Mormons are?
This is unbelievable, man.
Yeah. And how did they treat Black people before 1978, that very Mormon organization?
Yeah.
It's like he's talking all of this. We met. But there's no policy proposals, outcome. There is no outcome-based anything for what he's talking about.
Unbelievable.
Nothing.
I know the Mormons. Y'all put one in the chat if you know who the Mormons are. The Mormon Church. Studies tonight. I want to thank LaKenzie Kim. You guys have ever had a Mormon? How many of you guys have ever met a Mormon? How many of you all have ever had an interaction with a Mormon? How many of you all have ever had a Mormon come to your house and knock on your door? Go to all Black neighborhoods, working class Black neighborhoods. They will go to suburban Black neighborhoods. They will go to all kind of Black neighborhoods. And I've seen them.
Mormons don't do that. Mormons don't come to Black communities. Come on, man. Stop that. What the fuck are you talking about, man?
And my mama, she liked the company.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I was gonna say MOT. Maybe they do now. Maybe that they've gotten past, the whole Black people were basically what was the doctrine? I can't remember what it was. It was basically like Black people were basically angels of Satan or something like that.
Yeah,
something in the doctrine. So yeah, maybe now they moved past it. They're a little more open. Maybe now they come to Black neighborhoods.
Yeah.
But my mother liked talking to them. She liked talking to Mormons.
Unbelievable, man.
This is a racist. This institution, they got a racist history.
Glad he said it.
30 years later, the number of Black people in the Mormon church has significantly increased. Thank you, man, Friday. The number of Black people who are Mormon, they got Black people in the Mormon church. And the reason why they got Black people in the Mormon church is because Mormons made outreach. They talked to them. They didn't send them email. They didn't just put flyers on their doors or what have you. They didn't send them stuff, through the mail. They went and they talked to Black people. And you have Black people who are now Mormon. Y'all can look it up. Y'all Google it. Go back and watch that. I don't want y'all to watch it closely and carefully. Donald Trump won the debate. He won it not just on domestic policy, but he won it on foreign policy too. He won that debate. He won the debate.
Presidential debate against Biden.
And let me just be clear. I'm not. This is not a string. I'm not caping for Donald Trump, guys. I'm not caping for Donald Trump. I didn't vote for Trump.
Oh,
what?
Really?
What?
Oh,
what?
Really?
What?
Yeah, that's
what?
always been.
What?
Oh, you can't make this up, man. I mean, for somebody who claims to be an independent, it sounds like a lot, there's a lot of campaigning going on here, man.
I mean, last time I checked,
look, there's nothing wrong with being a conservative and being on the side that you're on. It's just that now that you're over there, organize for something while your ass is over there. Because right now, we're not talking about no policy proposals. You're like, okay, they talked to us, we threw our vote away, and we didn't get anything, and that's what happened. We went from not participating to participating and getting nothing. Progress. Like, no progress still, sir.
Nah, I just don't see, like, there were independents on the ballot. Like, you could have voted for like what was it, the Green Party candidate or a Libertarian candidate. You could have voted or wrote them in. So I don't get this false frame of, well, Donald Trump. I mean, there are other people, but I'm not a pro-Trump or anything, even though I've done nothing but sing the praises of Trump this whole stream. But anyway,
Yeah.
Trump was making inroads into the black male vote and population, what happened? Kamala Harris and Biden, all of a sudden, now they want to talk about black men. Now they want to talk about black men. And we've seen the similar dynamic, guys. We've seen the similar dynamic with the gubernatorial race in Georgia between Brian Kemp and Stacy Abrams. Brian Kemp and Stacy Abrams. There are so many brothers who have done videos on what is happening in Georgia, especially with black men. There have been polls that have been taken in Georgia which show that black men are not excited about Stacy Abrams. They are not excited about her.
Is that so?
And because they are not excited about Stacy Abrams at the very, very last minute. So here we are in October, right? We're in October. They have elections in November. October is just about over. They have elections in November. In mid-September, Stacy Abrams, having done all this campaigning for about a year, realizes she has this epiphany. She has this awakening, which, oh my God, I need to say something to black men. But it only happens in a reactionary fashion once she realized what the polls are saying, that black men ain't excited about her in Georgia. And the reason why black men, you all know the reason why. I mean, there's so many reasons, but the main reason that black men are not excited about her is that black men have wakened up, and that black men understand where we are in terms of the Democratic Party. We know that these people are still not interested in serious with us. And although Stacey Abrams is running for the governorship of Georgia, the governorship of Georgia is not the U.S. presidency, but she's still tied to a party. Stacey Abrams is tied to a party that doesn't care about black men.
Let's think about this for a second. You can't, I have yet to see, I don't know about you, Renaissance man. I have yet to see any policy by Republicans during the last election cycle that reflected their interest in black men. Have you?
No, I haven't seen anything. MOT's back.
Renaissance, if you're speaking, you're muted.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Well, while Renaissance man gets himself together,
can you hear me?
There is no policy that I have come across that reflects this idea that Republicans have the best interests of black men. So go ahead, Renaissance.
Yeah, can you hear me, Mike?
I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. No, I was gonna say MOT's in the back too. He's back. No, like I said, this whole thing makes no sense. I don't get where people are trying to point this idea that Republicans are somehow going to, bring black men their interest. At best, you're going to get used, because I mean, this whole party is basically embracing white nationalism at this point. That's where it is, and it's like, you have people beating the drum of white nationalists. You have black men run over there like, okay, guys, let's get in order. I'm like, do you not know what time it is? Do you not see what's going on here, guys? Like, read the room.
Unbelievable, man.
And Stacy Abrams, her politics, there is nothing about her politics that speaks to the issues and concerns of black men. Like most Democrats, she's concerned about women's issues. She's concerned about women's health. She's concerned about abortion. She's concerned about women who are dealing with evictions and all that kind of stuff.
Wasn't the Republican Party who were running around state to state and leveraged the Supreme Court's decision on Roe v. Wade to push anti-abortion legislation? So how can you say it was just Democrats that were really pushing this whole abortion thing and these social justice issues, when in fact it was the Republican Party who leveraged this whole entire thing? How can you say that? What happened when they put the abortion bill on the ballot in 2022 and they voted? Which way? Which way did people vote?
They lost in Kansas. Yeah, I didn't realize there are more registered independents in Kansas than there are Democrats. and that abortion was put on the ballot and got struck down.
Yeah,
no, that's what these guys are missing.
You're trying to play the culture warrior game, but at the same time, you're not understanding. Republicans pushed a lot of this. So why are we talking about Stacey Abrams only being concerned about abortion and women's reproductive rights when in fact they were being taken away by the very same party that you're championing right now? It doesn't make any sense.
She's concerned about the LGBTQ people. She's concerned about protecting.
Well, wait a second here. Wasn't it DeSantis who pushed the Don't Say Gay bill? Wasn't it DeSantis who pushed all this anti-woke legislation? So if you're saying that Stacey Abrams and the Democrats are the only ones pushing all this type of stuff, in fact, it's really the Republicans pushing it too. If you really want to be technical about this, in fact, they're the ones who are the ones passing all the legislation. I mean, the same-sex marriage bill that just passed had 15 Republicans on the bill. What are you talking about?
The rights of LGBTQ people. She's concerned about climate change.
All right, man. Climate change. Let's take this into consideration. Go ahead, Renaissance.
Now that's the thing. Like when people start talking about making these deals with Republicans, I'm like, that's the one thing I'm like, okay, what are y'all gonna do about climate change? You got a bunch of people on the right who don't even believe in it. And I'm like, when you look at how it's going to affect people both domestically and internationally, it's going to be domestically, it's going to be black people disproportionately affected, just like any natural disaster, be it, Hurricane Katrina, the Great Flood of the 1920s. There's all this history.
Heat islands, right? These heat islands, these sort of in predominantly black areas, you have these sort of these inclement weather, this hot weather thing that happens where it's 1.5 degrees hotter in predominantly black neighborhoods than it is in white neighborhoods, mostly because it lacks vegetation and it lacks proper efficiency for distributing the heat that's in these places. And so what happens is black people die from heat stroke and all other ailments that impact them from climate change. How can you argue against this?
Yeah. That, and when you look at it internationally, it's going to be basically developing nations. Some of these places, some of these African nations where, people are still getting power, consistent power.
But no, that's flat blackness. That's flat blackness. No, we don't talk about Africa and these other diasporan places. No, we don't talk about that.
Yeah.
We're only concerned about the Black American experience, who are descendants of slaves who vote Democrat. That's the only thing that we're concerned about. According to him.
Yeah, people like that are gonna be disrespected just because of you basically you're gonna see in a lot of these places where if you don't have a consistent access to a power source with the way that heat waves are gonna be coming, people are literally gonna be dying because they don't have, it's gonna be so hot outside, people will die, especially if they don't have air conditioned homes. So I mean,
didn't we just see a storm come through Buffalo and bury these people, these people alive?
Yeah,
we just saw that.
Yeah, so like I said, dismissing like this is just some issue that's of no importance, or a lot of times it gets painted as this white liberal yuppie type of issue. I'm like, no, that's a Black issue if anything I've ever seen. Look at what happened to Jackson with the water crisis, and basically they're saying, hey, there's a flood, the pressure is messed up and that messes up the water system.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but what he's doing is he's just speaking to the prevailing ignorance of people who don't know anything about the process itself, because he doesn't give any answers, he doesn't give any solutions, he doesn't give any policy proposals, he doesn't give any nothing. It's like, well, we got to take stuff away from the Democrats. Okay, what are you getting when you going over there to the Republican Party? We'll get back to you on that. But at least they ain't voting Democrat. Like, oh, okay, all right.
She's concerned about the standard concerns of political liberals, the Democratic Party, and those standard concerns have absolutely nothing to do with Black men, particularly heterosexual Black men.
Rah, rah, man.
She has nothing to say about Black male economic enfranchisement, nothing to say about poverty among Black men, homelessness among Black men, unemployment among Black men. She says nothing about capital acquisition among Black men or the overall economic enfranchisement. She has nothing to say about those things. You know what she did? Here's the thing, guys. Y'all support, y'all like the channel. Y'all like, y'all share, and y'all subscribe. We're over 1 hour right now. We're over 1 hour now. I'm telling you, I'm taking my time. I don't know how long this stream is going to be. I'm not going to be here forever, guys, but I have to take my time and lay this out. Do you know what Stacy Abrams did, guys?
No, tell us.
At the last minute, when she realized that she was not doing well with Black men, she created these fake barbershop talks, right? And
I thought you wanted outreach.
Say that again, MLT.
I thought he wanted outreach.
Yeah.
Camp produced these statements. Her camp produced this thing called Stacy Abrams Plan for Black Men. And y'all can Google it. I'm not gonna go through it point by point. Y'all can Google it. But I'm gonna tell you this. That plan that she put out, which you can Google, is no different from the Lift Every Voice plan. This was the same. The Lift Every Voice plan was the plan that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden had. And it was the plan that they created in response to questions about what they're going to do about the Black vote. And it was a response to questions in particular about what they're going to do about Black men in particular. It was in response to Donald Trump's Platinum Plan. Joe Biden had that plan is called the Lift Every Voice plan. It was a response to Donald Trump's Platinum Plan. And it was a last minute response.
Let's go over this. Yeah. Let's do this, because I think he said enough, and I think he's hung himself enough, and that noose is really tight around his neck right now. Let's bring up the Platinum Plan real quick. Okay. Let me bring this up real quick. The White House. House.org. .gov.
Hey, sorry, I had to step away for a second, but no, Mo, to your point on, he said he wanted engagement.
Yeah.
And now he's complaining about engagement. That's
No.
the whole point.
What you want is platitudes without action, engagement with policy bad. That's what the problem is. Now, once you come up with tangibles and a solution, that's too much for them. But if you give them platitudes and just man, they're okay with that. And it's like it doesn't make any sense. And this is why these people don't debate. They don't go anywhere saying anything like this. You don't hear these people having any political discussions. You don't see any round tables without. And it's like, I don't get how ignorant people are about something as simple as policy proposals. I don't get that.
Yeah.
It's
So
boring.
Here's Trump's platinum plan from the White House. Okay. Opportunity by achieving historic employment levels for Black Americans, as well as increasing access to capital for new businesses. President Trump has been committed to ensuring all Black Americans can achieve the American dream. Doesn't tell you how it goes. Security. By signing into law the celebrated First Step Act, President Trump has brought common sense criminal justice reform to American people for the first time in decades, while ensuring that our streets and communities are safe for families and business owners. Doesn't tell you how it was implemented or who supported it. Prosperity. As the first president to provide long-term funding to historically Black colleges and universities, the administration continues to seek immediate and generational advancement for Black Americans. This is not true. Fairness. As demonstrated through his actions to initiate investment into opportunity zones, as well as address health disparities, wage gaps, and necessary education reforms, President Trump works every day to advance a fair and just America for the Black community. Doesn't tell you how it was implemented.
Yeah, here's the other thing.
Yep.
The three things you just discussed, all those things target a small minority of Black people. When you start talking about Black business owners and actually look at the ones that actually employ people, it's something crazy. Like 95% of Black businesses have one employee.
Yeah.
So you're talking about, once again, very small group of people. When you start talking about HBCUs, not saying they're not important, but the majority of Black students actually attend PWIs, not HBCUs. And the bill that was actually funded by a Democrat. And then when Trump talked about what the last one, fairness, that one speaks for itself. I mean, come on, dude.
No, this is nothing more than a bumper sticker, right? 3 million new jobs for the Black community. I don't see it. Black employment has been down for Black men, since Trump has been in office. So I'm not sure what he's talking about. Creating 500,000 new Black-owned businesses. No, we haven't seen the numbers tick up for that from the SBA or the Department of Labor at all, or the MBDA, Minority Business Development Association. Increase access to capital in the Black communities by almost $500 billion. We know this is a lie, that there's no $500 billion. There was never any $500 billion there. That's the amount of money that is spent on, from a federal standpoint, on businesces for infrastructure. In total. So it's not, you don't have access to $500 billion because Black people only get 1.6% of that. In fact, Black men get less than 1% of all of this. So safe urban neighborhoods with highest policing standards. Yeah. So safe that, a guy like Kyle Rittenhouse, can run up in Kenosha and go shoot people, right? So safe, right? Commit to working on a Second Step Act. Never materialized. Access to better education and job training opportunities. Nothing materialized. Give Black churches the ability to compete for federal resources for their community. Never materialized. Bring better and tailored healthcare to address historic disparities. Not according to George Floyd. That didn't happen.
Well, I'm just curious. How do you give Black churches the ability to compete for federal resources for their community?
I don't even know what that statement means. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah. Immigration policy that protects American jobs. I don't see any of that materializing because Tyson's Chicken and Purdue, yeah, they're all still using immigrant labor. Advance home ownership opportunities and enhance financial literacy in the Black community. If we're using the manosphere as a barometer, I don't see too much financial literacy around here. Onshoring manufacturing to advance jobs and develop opportunities for Black-owned businesses. I have yet to see any manufacturing come to a predominantly Black neighborhood that was claimed by Ron Neal had all of these sort of woeful Democratic leadership in there. Paid for by the Donald Trump for President Incorporated. Yeah, nothing. Yeah, there was nothing here. It was a nothing burger. This whole thing was a nothing burger.
Two pages, a 2-page plan. Versus you got a lift every voice and sing plan that was what, 60 pages?
Yeah. Yeah. So
they just want to be pandered to. They're not interested in actual policy proposals. Yeah. They just want to be pandered to. And your face, Democrat, look at that. We're going to sabotage democracy. And all of a sudden they expect everybody to come team with them and set up things exclusively for them. No, never gonna happen.
No, it's funny. Like I said, these guys can't figure out what they want. Well, they do. It's just they try to misrepresent it. You go from one side of, well, I don't like the Democrats. I don't like that Hillary Clinton says she has hot sauce in the bag, and I don't like the Bill Clinton's playing the saxophone on Arsenio Hall's show. We don't want symbolism being pandered to. But then you go crazy about a 2-page platinum plan and a meeting with Steve Bannon.
Yeah, and a president dancing to YMCA while he's in the White House and the country's being torn apart, by his own insurgency.
Yeah. And then like you said, oh, okay, we still got the Democrats, and it's like, dude, you still have to live in this country too. Like,
yeah. So, Ron Neal said Stacy Abrams did not have anything. She waited to the last minute to engage Black men. But let's listen to her interview on Earn Your Leisure.
Yes.
It's very rare that we have royalty here with us, and so we appreciate you and the investors. My parents were talking to me about it after. They were like, "Oh my God, is she backstage? Can we see?" I'm like, "Mom, it's a video." She's like, "Oh my God, please." I'm like, "It's a video." But thank you again.
So it was my honor.
So we'll get into this conversation. I guess we can just do how we usually do. We all just ask questions. So the first question that I have is, a lot of times from the business side of things, right? So a lot of times people say that politicians don't understand business because they were career politicians and they stifle business and they hurt business. But you're actually an entrepreneur and you have a variety of different businesses. So what are some things that you've learned from entrepreneurship that you think, has helped you or can potentially help you in running a very important state like Georgia in politics?
Well, the first business that I started wasn't technically considered a business. I wrote a novel when I was in law school and had to sell it during my first year as an attorney. And that taught me about marketing, but also taught me about market research. This was at the beginning of Amazon, and I had to figure out a way to break through with a Black authored romance novel, which was really rare at the time, to get Black women, basically for Black women to be published as romance novelists by big platforms. And so I needed to be the #1 selling book that day. So I got all of the people I had ever met to buy from Amazon on the exact same day. And that catapulted me, and people started asking about my book. Now, it didn't last very long because some other book came out the next day. But that moment was thinking about, how do you harness, if you don't have the platforms people are used to, how do you use the networks that you do have to develop your marketing approach? The second business I started was a consulting firm. And that was really about, how do you chase business? How do you get people to hire you when what you're selling is your mind? And different from a commodities company where you're able to sell while you sleep, you've got to be awake for consulting to work. And so that's really about, how do you offer a differentiated product that people understand. And then my latest company was a company called Now Account. I'm no longer day to day with it, but that's a financial services company, because I know that one of the impediments I faced in another business was access to capital. And that's something that small businesses face all the time. And in particular in Georgia, because we lost more banks than any other state during the Great Recession, and Black-owned businesses have the least amount of access because we lost so many banks. Access to capital is the difference between success and failure.
So Ron Neal said that Stacy Abrams was talking all of this legitimate stuff, all of this woke stuff, right? She wasn't talking about the business. She wasn't talking about blackmail enfranchisement or Black enfranchisement for that matter. And where in reality, she runs a very successful business and built her capital up and actually to catapult herself to where she is right now. We go to Donald Trump, and what we see here is a bumper sticker that says Platinum Plan, and we're supposed to be impressed by this.
And the crap goes wild just
Yeah.
because it had the word platinum in it. Yeah, okay.
Because it's not just about operating capital, it's being able to even know where to go and having someone trust that it's worth risking. When you bring that to the governor's office, it's about making sure we're creating programs that actually address these challenges. How do we market our small businesses? We do a great job of championing big companies, but how do we market our small businesses? 2, how do we solve the challenges of those small businesses that are completely and totally driven by their owner, by their entrepreneur? How do you bolster them and make sure they can do what they need? And then 3, how do we make certain that we're underwriting the financial risk so that those small businesses get the capital they need to succeed?
Yeah, I love that you keep talking about small businesses, because that's one of the reasons we love Georgia and we love Atlanta.
MOT, you got a lot of noise in the background.
When we go there, we see businesses and we see people that look like us owning businesses, and we see men and we see tons of women and entrepreneurs creating their own businesses. And so you also brought up programs. Can you talk to us about the Georgia Commercial Investment Program? Because this is one of those things, like, how do we get capital? Where are we getting it from? How do we deploy? Can you talk to us about that?
Sure. So there are 2 pieces to what I want to do. One is I want to expand the purchasing power of the state. There was a report just yesterday on a local television station about the fact that in Georgia, just this past year, more than $7 billion in contracts were let. Less than 7% went to minority-owned and women-owned firms. And you always have to be suspicious of that number because it's different. It's different to be a person of color than it is to be a woman. And having been both my entire life, I understand the different treatment that exists. But even if you combine both of those, it's only 7.7% of the contracting that we know of. People of color are 48% of the state. To only have 7% of the contracts is absurd. And so one thing the governor can do without legislation is use Georgia's purchasing power to support small businesses by directing the Department of Administrative Services to establish and monitor targets to make certain that all the state agencies are actually purchasing intentionally from minority-owned small businesses, and also providing the technical assistance so those small businesses can actually secure and fulfill those state contracts.
Yeah. Can you pause right here, Mike?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what she's basically laying out, that has been used historically in Atlanta specifically. Maynard Jackson was notorious for this. If you ever go, I saw it on a flight when I was flying back to DC from Atlanta. There's a documentary on him. And what he did was essentially that. He basically said, hey, if you look at, he was talking specifically to banks, that, hey, there are no Black people working at your banking institution. Same thing with your construction contracts, when they were building the airport and expanding it, making sure that a certain amount of set-asides are put aside for Black businesses. And at one point, he had to basically threaten to take the city's money and put it in a bank in another state to get more diversity in the banking community. So what she's talking about has a historical precedence. And that's where you get people thinking that, Atlanta's this Black Mecca and this and that. That's those actions really laid the groundwork for that reputation.
Go ahead, Moti.
Yeah, and it's like, these are tangible based things that you never get credit for. But somehow you get all this credit for mythological based things that never materialized in anything. So it's kind of like most people just want to be pandered to, that they don't want the responsibility of reading or understanding anything. Like, I don't understand it. It just really gets on my nerves, man.
And several banks closed in Georgia, that was under Republican leadership. You got to keep this in mind, that there hasn't been any Democratic leadership in Georgia at all. And all this is happening under Republican leadership. And if you let Ronald Neal tell you that Democrat-run cities and states are trash, right? They're blighted, and that somehow we can't trust them. We need to get off of the plantation. We need to go over to do business with the Republican side. But if we're talking about doing business with the Republicans, I don't hear anything about what she's saying coming from Republicans. Now, allegedly, Bannon sat down and talked to black men in South Carolina. What he talked about, I don't know. But this is what Stacy Abrams is saying. So when you hear people in this space talk about Stacy Abrams did not have a blueprint, or she didn't have a game plan, she didn't have a strategy, you're hearing it right from her mouth right now. What she did, not what she plans to do, what she did and what she can do if she was elected.
Part of that is what I call my commercial investment, my small business capital investment fund, which is $10 million that would then allow those same small businesses to do, if they have to go and buy initial equipment to take the contract on, let's give you the money and underwrite your loan to get that contract. Because if you get that contract, $50,000 should not stop you from making $5 million. But for a lot of small businesses, it's the point of entry that's so expensive. In contrast, the current governor is going to establish a study to look at whether or not this is a problem. You don't have to study Georgia to understand that it is a problem when 48% of your population only gets 7% of your business. And that's the conversation that's happened every year for the last 20 years. Governor after governor says, well, we'll talk about it. We'll study it. They won't move legislation to solve it. Well, as governor, you solve the problem because I don't need legislation. I can do it directly. And there was something you said at the opening. I not only will be the first Black governor of Georgia, I'll be the first Black woman governor in American history.
Wow.
And so I'm bringing to this conversation not only the skills, but a very strong sense of urgency around solving this problem, because if we don't tackle it, it will be 100 years, not 10, not 20, 100 years before we close the gap between minority-owned businesses and non-minority firms in the state of Georgia.
Tying into that point, after your victory, let's speak that into existence. What initiatives will be put in place to help close that racial wealth gap? And because Atlanta is such a mecca for African-American and African-American entrepreneurs, and the state of Georgia is amazing, what plans can entrepreneurs look forward to that you'll put in place that will help us close that gap?
Absolutely. So the commercial investment program is a big one because the state spends billions of dollars on a range of things. So it's not just construction contracts for DOT, it's who's providing food at events that the state is doing. It's who's doing janitorial services, who is providing the paper. All of those purchases are purchases that the state can direct. And so the Georgia Commercial Investment Program is part of it. But the other part is the Supplier Diversity Initiative. And that is, I'm going to make certain that state agencies, all of them, when they procure goods and services, that they have to actively seek out and support new suppliers that are owned by groups that are underrepresented. And that includes people of color, veterans, the disabled, women, but all of those groups have to be given primacy. And because in Georgia, those groups often overlap, by targeting these communities, we actually hit the broadest swath of possibilities. I also want to make certain that major state contractors have to implement their own programs for supplier diversity. Why should the state contract with someone who is not looking at the whole state as viable? And then the last big thing for me is what I call cluster contracts. So you have these big companies that bid on these major contracts, billion-dollar contracts. If you're a small company, if you can't bite off $1 billion, but you could do about 200 million. Right now, you're not permitted to participate. Instead, they give it to the big company and they tell the big company, oh, give them 10%. The 10% rarely materializes, or it always goes to the same small company they've always given it to. I want to create what I call cluster contracts, letting 2 or 3 or 4 businesses come together to bid on that contract. So you have 4 companies that instead of all trying to compete for this $1 billion contract, they instead get 150 million, 250, 350 of that contract, but they can all grow at the same time and they're hiring new people. And when you combine that with the small business investment fund that can underwrite the capital risk, and you're directing technical assistance to make sure they can actually participate in the process. Because if you've ever tried to bid on a state contract or even a city contract, procurement's hard.
Yeah.
I was one of the lawyers for procurement at the city of Atlanta. And so for me, it's not just about what I know as an entrepreneur, it's also what I know as someone who's been on the delivery side of government, not just running for office, but actually having to do the work of making it happen.
Hey,
So
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another point. What she's talking about there, she's talking about the concept of clustering. Essentially, you saw that happen with the Biden administration, with the I believe it's the Black Chamber of Commerce. They basically complained about the Trump administration because what they were doing was essentially what she was talking about was, you know, instead of breaking these contracts apart or breaking them down where, small businesses could actually, bid on them, they were bundling these contracts where basically, like you said, if you can't afford to basically bid on $1 billion contract and the capital requirements and all that, you were just out of luck. So it just basically favored the large companies. So this is something that's not only a Georgia problem, it's a federal problem as well.
But according to Ron Neal, Stacey Abrams wasn't talking about this. She was talking about LGBTQ, women's reproductive rights, and all of this intersectionality. Doesn't sound like it to me here. I don't remember Brian Kemp talking about this on the campaign trail. I don't remember Brian Kemp talking to black men about this. Where was Killer Mike? Where was Ice Cube on this? Her plan is coming out of her own mouth. It's not even on paper. It's coming out of her own mouth. Not what she can do, but what she has done and what strategy actually makes sense and that can be implemented without any gubernatorial power. Food for thought, man.
Those are 3 big opportunities. I'm talking billions of dollars that can suddenly be in the hands and in the pockets of people of color, of Black people in particular, because we're 33% of the population. We're 2.1% of the business revenue in Georgia.
So
this is all happening under Republican leadership, and they're telling you that Republicans are good for business. Where? Let
me ask you this. For education, I saw you was talking to a little baby the other day, and you was kind of educating him on why governor is so important. Can you just explain? So there's no Black governors currently, right?
Correct.
All right. So there's no Black governors currently in America. And from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, the reason why that's such a big issue and the reason why the governor is so important is that the governor is really the most powerful person in the state because they control budgets, they control a lot of the state issues, even more so than state representatives or senators. And the president doesn't really have power on a state level. This is why, like, COVID is so many different rules depending on which state you're in. So can you give us an education on why the governor is so important and why people need to pay more attention to who their governor is?
Absolutely. So let's think about it this way. When we think about the structure of government, we have been trained to focus on the president because that's the most powerful job in the nation. And for Black and brown people, it's also been incredibly important because states have often refused to acknowledge our citizenship and our humanity. So I'll use 3 examples. Stand Your Ground, the law that killed Trayvon Martin, that wasn't federal law. That was signed by the governor of Florida. That's how Stand Your Ground became. But once it happens in a state, it spreads like a contagion. So now you've got Stand Your Ground in Georgia and everywhere else. Number 2, mass incarceration did not start with the 94 crime bill. 3 Strikes You're Out was actually done by the governor of California in 1994. The federal government decided to follow, but it started with the governor. And Jim Crow, the stripping Black people of humanity for 150 years, never had a single federal law. It was all state laws signed by governors. And so When we think about how our lives are lived, we think about the presidency because it's national, or the mayor because it's hyper local. But all the money that comes from the federal government comes through the state. The governor decides. All of the things your mayor wants to do in the South, especially in Georgia, has to be approved by, if it's a big program, it has to be approved by the governor. One example is that in 2003, I worked for Shirley Franklin. I wrote the first living wage law in the history of the state of Georgia. It would have guaranteed that any company doing business in Georgia had to pay a living wage. It could have transformed the economies of thousands of Georgians. We got that legislation through the city council, the mayor signed it, and the following January, the governor signed a law making it illegal for any city to pass a law guaranteeing a wage.
Did you hear that, Ron Neal? I'm sorry, but she wrote a law that would have guaranteed a living wage that would have benefited Black men greatly, but somehow it was overturned by who? Prohibited by who? Oh, okay. Okay.
That's what the state does. If you're worried about housing, the governor has to sign legislation that says that that local government has the authority to actually enforce housing rules and make sure that you can afford to live in the home that you live in. But for business owners, where the governor is so incredibly important, is that most of the decisions we think have to be made by committee, in Georgia, it gets made by the governor. Right now, the governor of Georgia is spending billions of dollars. Every time you hear him announce money that's being, out of that COVID money that's being spent, he doesn't have to ask a single person for permission. He decides by himself, with whomever he decides to bring in the room, how he wants to spend that money. So the question is, whose name do you want to have on the checkbook? Someone who does not believe in investing in communities of color, someone who has never demonstrated any interest until it was election year, or someone who has come up the hard way through our business community and through our city and state, who has the knowledge and experience, but also now the authority to get good done. The shorthand is, imagine Maynard Jackson and what he did for Atlanta. Imagine if he had been governor of Georgia. That's the kind of governor I could be.
Wow.
Yeah. So in order to have the right governor, you have to mobilize people to vote. And one of the things that you did in general election, and rightfully so, we were credited with helping win Georgia and ultimately winning the general election for Biden, was getting people out. But when you get people out in numbers, certain things start to change, and you start to see more voter suppression, and you see more voter discrimination. So my question to you is, like, what do we do now, right? It feels like we have to press the reset to make sure that people understand the influence and impact that this is going to have. And so is there education around it? How are we telling the people, the population of Georgia, like, hey, there are some changes. Here's what you need to know before you go out?
Well, most of my entrepreneurship has focused on business-oriented things because I grew up poor. I didn't like it and don't ever want to do it again. And I like being able to take care of myself and take care of my family. But I've also been very aggressive about nonprofit work and civic work. So I created the New Georgia Project. I'm no longer affiliated with it, but I launched the New Georgia Project in 2013. That's the organization that did a lot of the work on getting people registered.
So she created the New Georgia Project in 2013. Make sure you write that down in your notes.
I created Fair Fight, which is the work that we've been doing to make sure that we have fair voting laws, or if the laws are not fair, that we know why they're not fair and we fight back.
She also created Fair Fight. Write that down as well.
I created the organization Fair Count. Fair Count made certain that we had an accurate census for the first time in 30 years, actually counting Black and brown folks. And it was the first year in almost 30 years we did not have a statistical undercount. And that matters to businesses because the money that comes to the state through the SBA and through all of these different grants and loans, it's all based on the accurate count of the people in your state. So when Black people get undercounted, we also get under-resourced.
Fair Count, jot that down as well.
So those are the groups I've started. And part of what all of those groups are doing, independent of me, independent of my campaign, but they are embedded in community, making sure people understand what the voting laws are, what changed, what stayed the same, and why it matters. Separately, our campaign is doing that same work through our voter protection efforts. That's why we're urging people to vote early.
Yeah.
We get 3 weeks of voting in Georgia starting October 17th. Because of how difficult these new laws are, because of the hurdles that Brian Kemp and Brad Raffensperger have put in place, do not get distracted by the fact that they didn't commit treason. The same time they were not committing treason, they were also putting in more voter suppression laws. And because of those new voter suppression laws, we need folks to vote early to get it out of the way. In Georgia, we have the #1 likelihood of having long lines in Black communities, up to 8 hours. And so if we want people to be able to vote, we need to get our votes banked. We need to get it done and get on with our lives. And that means voting as much as possible, as early as possible. And when I say as much as possible, I mean getting as many people as possible. Nobody should vote more than once.
No,
I don't want anyone to
more
take me
than
out of
Let's be clear.
context.
Yeah.
So
What words of encouragement do you have for the citizens of Georgia who may feel as if no matter what they do, if they vote early or they bring friends with them, it won't have an impact on the outcome?
I have proven that it matters. In 2018, I didn't become governor by 54,723 votes.
That's 2 concerts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's 2 concerts. And there were enough people. Now, there were a lot of people who tried to vote who weren't allowed to participate in our elections. But there were a lot more people who didn't think their voices mattered. And it's a truism, but if your voice didn't matter, they wouldn't be working so hard to stop you from being heard.
That's true.
But the other part of it is, and it's a legitimate critique, for a lot of folks, they've never seen their lives change. It didn't really matter who got elected because their lives stayed the same. You've never had anyone like me running for office. What I like to describe is not what I did before I ran, but when I didn't win, I still made sure that I helped pay off the medical debt of 68,000 Georgians, especially people who wanted to start their own businesses, because we know that medical debt often stops you from being able to do anything.
So she helped pay off the medical debt of 68,000 Georgians.
Wait. Yeah, I was going to add too. I slightly disagree when she said that people haven't seen their lives change. If you listen to online here, everybody's crying about, the 94 crime bill and mass incarceration. So, people's lives change. It just may not have been for the positive. And it was directly correlated to politics. So,
right.
I made sure that people got access to the COVID vaccine. I started at a company that was moving millions of dollars to small businesses. I made sure that if you were on EBT when you weren't getting the stimulus checks, that we got $1,000 check written to a bunch of families across Georgia who weren't getting the money they needed.
So she created a UBI program. Got it.
That's what I do when I don't have the job. Imagine what I would do if I had the job. So I'm not asking people to forget what they know. I'm asking them to believe what they see. Yes, the current governor reopened the state, but he also passed a law making it illegal for anyone who got harmed, any essential worker, to sue their boss for not having protection. We have one of the highest rates of death from COVID in the nation. And so, yes, some people benefited, but most of our businesses didn't get a dime of PPP. He got money. He gave a $694 million contract to his friends for giving him money in his campaign. My mission has been and always will be, how do you invest in people to make sure they thrive? Because I've been at the bottom and I don't want to be there, and I don't think anyone else needs to be there. If you're willing to work for it, my mission is to work with you, but I've got to get the job first. And that's why I need folks to show up.
So Kemp spent $694 million. How much of that was spent with Black men?
No. I wonder, did Killer Mike get any of that money?
We don't know.
No, I'm being serious. You're saying he's a good guy and everything, and she's saying he gave out, a $690 million contract to his friends. What are these Black men who are, patting these guys on the back? What are they really getting here?
Trying to figure that out myself.
Let me ask you this: something that's very hot in the news. President Biden's plan to get rid of student loans for
Mm-hmm.
$10,000 if you make under $125,000 a year, and $20,000 for Pell Grant recipients for the same income threshold. So it's kind of controversial. Of course, some people are saying that, you know, they don't want to pay for somebody else's college education, is government handouts, different things of that nature. Some people are saying that it's not enough money. It's not fully really going to impact Black America in the way that it should, because it's not enough. What is your thoughts on the student loan crisis, and what is your thoughts on what he proposed, and what are some ideas that you have?
So I begin with my faith values. I don't begrudge another person's blessing.
Mm.
That $10,000, that $20,000 can be the difference between someone else's child being able to get an education and rise out of poverty. That can be the difference between someone being able to take care of their family member who has cancer. I want people to be able to have those blessings. And I paid off my student loans. I paid them off in January of 2019. I know the relief I felt, but I also know the burden I carried for years when I indeed had to make choices between paying my student loans and taking care of my family. And so I don't begrudge a person getting access to those resources. It, of course, is not enough because we have a broken system in this country. When my parents were going through college, even though they weren't able to fully leverage it because they grew up during Jim Crow, the ability to go to college was not the difference between your future and not having a future, but it also wasn't mortgaging your future. And so we have to tackle the broken nature of student debt in the United States. But this is an important start, and it is more than we had the day before, and that's critical to me. But what we have to layer on top of it is the fact that for many Black and for a lot of Black folks, that money is going to matter because we are more likely to finish to be in debt, but not have the degree to go with it. And so while it is not enough, it is more than we have, and it is substantial because we're also more likely to qualify for the 20,000 than the 10,000 because more of our people are in that bracket where we were also relying on Pell Grants. And I say we because I was. Mm-hmm. But what I want to do for Georgia is layer on top of that by making sure we're not creating a deeper hole. And that's why I want to restore free technical college in the state of Georgia. Once the Hope Scholarship was created, between the creation of the Hope Scholarship and 2011, technical college was free. Because we had to save the Hope Scholarship from economic ruin, we had to decrease the award for what was called the Hope Grant. But we now have $1 billion sitting in an unrestricted, unreserved fund that could be used right now to do exactly what we used to do. And that helps a lot of Black and brown folks, especially a lot of Black folks throughout the state of Georgia. So I want to restore that. Number two, I want to create need-based aid in Georgia. Georgia is one of only 2 states in the country that does not provide need-based aid, the only one in the South, which means if you want to see your way to college, you better not have a C average. That should not be the choice. And for Black students in Georgia, Black students are the least likely to get hope and the most likely to lose hope. But if we had need-based aid, we could fill in the gap. That, when you tie that to what's happening on the federal level, creates new opportunity. But the way to pay for it is critical. And that is that I want to use that unrestricted money that we already have, but I also want to expand gaming in Georgia, sports betting and casinos. That would generate $350 million a year upwards in order to invest in that education. And since it is our people who are spending money in the lottery, but we are the least likely to see the benefit, let's make certain that if we're going to have gaming, that our people benefit from that process. And that's my plan as the next governor.
Yeah, I'm.
So $1 billion in surplus right now, Kemp been sitting on. How much is that being shared with Black men right now? How much is that being shared with Black men? According to these guys, Republicans are good for business. But I'm not seeing any data or any sort of cited sources that shows that Black men are benefiting from this $1 billion surplus that's sitting under Governor Kemp's leadership. I thought Republicans are good for business. Democrats, all Democrat-run cities are all ruined. and blighted and we can't trust them, but we got this guy in office in Georgia and you're telling me that this guy's good for business, but nobody can point to anywhere where black men are benefiting from this $1 billion surplus or these free technical colleges that were overturned by Republicans. All right, man.
I'm glad that we brought.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I'm surprised that maybe she hits on it later. She talks about, Georgia technically, quote unquote, is the best place to do business, at least in the U.S., but it also has like one of the worst, quality of living standards.
Yeah.
When you look at it, Georgia does not adhere to the federal minimum wage, which, so when people start talking about, oh, it's good for business, Republicans are good for business. They literally mean they're good for like the small, the elite business owners. That's who they're really talking about. It's not good for the rank and file person. That's what she was getting at when she's talking about people's quality of living, and it's really not that good for the small business owner either.
Yep.
Brought up education and obviously free technical schools and teaching people skills are very important. One of the things that are near and dear to me, and I'm glad you brought it up, was increasing the pay for teachers.
Yes.
Increasing the pay for teachers is the most important job in the world. Everybody was taught and everybody learned at some point throughout their life. They definitely went to school. So can you talk about that? Because I know that was one of the things that you've been talking about throughout your campaign, increasing the pay for teachers, but also lowering the cost for healthcare for over 500,000 Georgians. Can you talk about how we get to that point?
Absolutely. So in Georgia, we pay teachers who are starting out less than they make in Mississippi. Now, I grew up in Mississippi. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
That Mississippi can afford to pay more, but Georgia can't.
Oh, wait a second here. I thought black boys reading on a third grade level, we need more black men become teachers, but yet they're getting paid less in Georgia than what they are in Mississippi. What's going on here? I thought the Republicans were good for business. What happened?
My opponent, the current governor, has said that he gave them $5,000 over 4 years, and that's enough. I will tell you, it's not enough because in real dollar terms, teachers today make less money than they made 20 years ago. So the purchasing power of that dollar is less. I want to right size their salaries by making sure that the starting salary in Georgia by the end of my term is $50,000. And at the same time, I want to increase pay for all educators by an average of $11,000. That means that we really truly create a meaningful change in their wages that is sustainable. I also want to make certain we're giving similar pay raises, although it's got to be done a little differently because they're paid by the school district and not by the state. But we need to increase pay for paraprofessionals, for school bus drivers, for cafeteria workers. You shouldn't work to educate our children and still be in poverty. That doesn't make any sense. And it is a solvable problem. At the same time, we know the other biggest driver of economic need and economic paucity in Georgia, and the best way to financial freedom is having insurance. Right now, health insurance is being denied to people who are making $9 an hour or less. And when you are starting your own small business, you probably can't afford health insurance for yourself, let alone for your employees. Well, in Georgia, we are forfeiting $3.5 billion every year that we've already paid for, but that the governor refuses to bring to the state. If we expand Medicaid, working people who make too much money to qualify for regular Medicaid, because for regular Medicaid, you got to be not only completely broke, but you also have to have a dependent or be disabled or be a senior, or you have to be able to buy into the Affordable Care Act, buy into Obamacare, and you have to make not a lot, but a lot more money than those making $9 an hour do. I want to get that population. Those are our students who are finishing college, but they aren't on their parents' insurance and they need insurance. And if we ever thought that you didn't need insurance if you were young, let's think about COVID. Let's think about monkeypox. But I also want those folks who are starting their business, who want to quit their job but can't afford to leave because they can't afford to lose their health insurance. And so their dreams die because they can't afford to go.
This is all happening under Republican leadership. According to Ron O'Neill, we need to sit down with Republicans. What are you sitting down talking to them about?
Yeah, no, one of the things she hit on too is that I think is really key is that, and I'm surprised she didn't highlight it, as you know, with AI and new technology that's coming out, essentially going forward, low skill jobs or jobs that pay well. Low skill jobs are going to disappear, and jobs that pay well are going to require lots of education, lots of training, be it a quality high school, K through 12 education, and some good technical training, as well as continuing education, or 4 years of college, some certifications, things along those lines. That if you don't have the educational system, and like she's saying, like basically, hey, if you're not paying your teachers anything, it's going to be hard to attract good teachers, which in turn is going to mean it's going to be hard to attract industry and those good paying jobs. So that's sort of the backwardness in all this, is that it's this lack of investment in education that's really holding people back as far as being prepared and having the skills for the jobs of the future, which that'll be good paying jobs. The other thing is her point on healthcare. That's key. Essentially that to me, that's one of the biggest arguments that people don't talk about for universal healthcare, is that, hey, if it's provided by the government and not your employer, you basically empower more entrepreneurship, because that does stop people from leaving their job as, hey, I have to have healthcare, or if they're married and they're trying to start a business, they'll get on their spouse's healthcare plan. But if you just make it, like I said, a universal thing, then you enable more of the gig economy, you enable more entrepreneurship. So it's a win all the way around there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Massachusetts has 98, 99% enrollment rate for healthcare coverage. You go to Georgia and people are suffering because they make too little to qualify, and too much to be a benefit. This is a disastrous sort of policy, but according to this Ron O'Neill, Republicans are good for this. Republican ideas are very good, and Stacy Abrams doesn't know what she's talking about, according to him.
If we expand Medicaid, we can do all of that, and we can pay for both of these things. Medicaid is $297 million a year, and to overall do the salary increases is $400 million. We have a $5 billion surplus in Georgia. Once we paid every bill,
a $5 billion surplus. How much of that are Black men getting? Let's hear.
Once we have put money into our savings account, 15%. Once we've accounted for growth in population, we have $5 to $6 billion just sitting there. My opponent says that he wants to do tax cuts. What he means is he wants to give tax breaks to the wealthiest Georgians, because the average Georgian will see $193. The wealthiest Georgians will see $10,000 or more. I want to instead pay our teachers, pay for health care, save the Atlanta Medical Center, keep doctors in our state, invest in small businesses, all of the things I'm talking about. He wants to give the money to the wealthy. I want to spend the money on the people. And we can do every single thing I'm talking about without raising a dime in taxes. And if you don't trust me, go to my website. I'm a big old nerd. We have a spreadsheet on my website that walks you through how the math works. We can absolutely do this.
I remember in 2007, I was in Midtown when the last big recession hit, driving to Norcross and remembering how fearful I was about when the recession was going to end. Tying into your last point, can you talk to us about the dangers of the economy in Georgia and how it would be impacted negatively if you don't win as governor, and some of the things your opponent plans to do and plans to cut if he wins?
So let's look back to what he did before Raphael Warnock, John Ossoff, and our Democrats in Congress sent billions of dollars to the state of Georgia. He slashed $1 billion from education. He cut the criminal justice reform programs, the recidivism programs, the diversion programs.
Wait a second. Criminal justice reform, wouldn't that benefit Black men? He cut those programs. Well, why would he do that? I thought he had. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say it wouldn't just benefit Black men. It would actually be more cost effective for the state, because when you don't have programs, you don't have things that basically address the problems that people have, that while they're in jail, in prison, they're much more likely to engage in behavior that's going to lead to recidivism. So things like degree programs that you can get, training, all those things, those skills that so when they come out, they can hit the ground running, provide for themselves, as well as have the support system there. All of that not only helps them, but it also helps with people not going back. Because I mean, putting someone in prison is not cheap. I mean, in a cheap state, it's like probably $35,000, maybe $40,000. In a more expensive state, it's closer to $50,000-$60,000 a year to incarcerate someone. So it's a lot of money going out of public funds to keep people, in prison.
Yep.
He cut resources for education, for healthcare. His response to need is not to solve the problem, it's to blame the victim. He wants to pick your pockets instead of putting money in your pockets. Now, he likes to talk broadly about who he benefits, but if you look at the numbers, the people who were falling are still falling. The people who are holding on by their fingernails. And he refuses to invest in their success. Let's look at housing. Georgia has an affordable housing crisis. We're only the 8th largest state, but we are number 3 in eviction filings and number 4 in actual evictions. Wow. And this isn't just Atlanta, this is across the state. I was down in Thomasville and they wanted to talk about the eviction rate down there. So this is a statewide issue. Well, the governor's response is to spend $62 million on homelessness programs. He will not invest in actually building the 207,000 units of affordable housing that we need. He will not work with our local governments to let them right size rent and inclusionary zoning. And so the current governor does not believe it's his job to help Georgia. His job is to have the headlines, not to read the fine print. My mission is the fine print. And if we have a recession, if we have taken that $5 billion and just given it to the wealthy, then everybody else is going to pay for it because that's what happens every single time. But if we keep that money, it's like making a balloon payment on your mortgage. We can put in a balloon payment for the state that helps build all of these things I'm talking about. So if something does happen, we've already built it into the budget. We're no longer paying extraordinary interest. We're just paying principal. That's what this could be used for. I want to do a balloon payment for Georgia so that if we get hit by a recession, our natural resources, the money we're going to make no matter what, will be enough to cover everything I'm talking about without raising taxes. But also we won't dip so low because we're suddenly seeing catastrophic effects on the poorest people because all of us pay the bill. Poverty isn't free.
Yeah.
All of us pay for it. And I'm the only person with a plan to make sure we do enough upfront that when it hits, we're ready for it and we can all get through it.
Can you talk about the supplier diversity initiative that you're proposing?
Yeah. So part of the supplier diversity initiative is that the state spends billions of dollars every single year buying services. Right now, you'll hear some folks who can get the janitorial service or they'll get hired to provide paper. I want to make sure we're also hiring lawyers, that we're hiring financiers, that we're hiring from every strata. But I also want to make certain it's not just certain departments. The Department of Aging has to buy something. Let's make sure they're buying from people who look like Georgia. When the Department of Behavioral Health has to hire, let's make certain when they are buying and purchasing, no matter which agency it is, they need to be looking at the diversity of their supply chain, especially DOT. DOT is going to get billions of dollars every year now because of the bipartisan infrastructure plan. Those billions of dollars right now are going 90% to majority-owned firms, not to minority-owned firms. These are billions of dollars that we helped bring here because we participated in these elections and we are half of this state.
I don't know if black men are getting a cut out of this. According to Ron O'Neill, Republicans are good for business. Now, according to this plan is not implemented because Kemp doesn't see the necessity for it. So how do you square the circle on, Kemp and the Republicans and Trump being good for business if black men aren't added to the spreadsheet?
The same thing is true with the Infrastructure Reduction Act, the Inflation Reduction Act. The Inflation Reduction Act is going to send billions to the state of Georgia, But right now, there's nothing to say that businesses of color, that Black businesses get any of those contracts. And the response from the governor is he'll look at it. Well, they've been looking at this for 40 years. They've never managed to do anything. Yeah. I say hire somebody who's actually proven she'll do the work.
Royalty indeed. Queen Stacy Abrams. When in January, when you won the seat, I'm interested in knowing, because I'm sure you have it planned out. What are the first 30 days look like? What initiatives are you putting in place right away? What are some things that you're going to overturn that you know are not going to work for the state anymore?
Number one, my first initiative is Medicaid expansion. Medicaid expansion is the single largest economic development program in Georgia history. If you think about Rivian, he's going to spend about $1.5 billion to build electric cars. And that's good. And that's going to create thousands of jobs. But it's going to be localized in Monroe County. It's going to be localized to those who can get jobs in that industry. If we expand Medicaid, we create 64,000 jobs across the state. And here's the way to think about it. The jobs are going where the people who don't have insurance are. So it's going to absolutely get to every part of the state. And it's going to get to the communities in the state that have not had access, because those are the folks who suddenly are going to have the health insurance they need to get mental health care, to get physical health care. And when those new doctors come in, they're going to need to go eat somewhere. So somebody who started their small restaurant, they're going to suddenly have customers. We're going to need pharmacists. We're going to need construction. Medicaid expansion is number one. Number two, I'm going to repeal criminal carry. We know that that law has made Georgia less safe, and particularly for Black men. I want you to all think about what that law means. By removing that permit, that means if you get pulled over, you don't get the presumption that you have the right to carry that concealed weapon, and you can't pull out your permit to show them that it's yours. You are presumed guilty by and large if that happens. And that's the worry I have. But it's also true that we've got stories right now of people wandering down the street by our schools, open carrying weapons. We have removed the background checks that used to happen with private sales and gun sales. That's what that constitutional carry, which is a lie, what criminal carry did was strip away a background check that protected us from 11,000 people who shouldn't have had those weapons. Number three, I'm going to repeal the ban on abortion after 6 weeks. And this should matter to every person, whether you're a woman or not. Because in the state of Georgia, women are now told you have to decide about your pregnancy before you know you're pregnant. And this has economic effects across the board. And in particular, Black women are most likely to die from maternal mortality issues than any other race. And it is worse in Georgia than it is in any other state. And Brian Kemp is refusing to act. In fact, he said he doesn't believe there should be exemptions for rape or incest. We have to understand that when a woman is forced to carry an unwanted pregnancy to term, the likelihood of her going into poverty increases, I think, by 40%. The likelihood of her being on food stamps within 4 years or within 5 years goes up dramatically. This has a real economic effect, but it also is costing us jobs. The gun law cost us $50 million because Music Midtown is not here in Georgia. I know Antoine Fuqua pulled a movie out of Georgia when the voting rights law came through. Think about all of the different films that won't come to Georgia because women are like, I'm not coming here because I don't know what's going to happen to me on a year-long shoot. We are risking a $4 billion industry. And for people who say, well, no, we're all set. We've got Perry Studios and we've got, the studio in Fayetteville. Let's remember, Georgia got the film industry by taking it from Michigan and from North Carolina when they got Republicans. Y'all may not be old enough to remember Dawson's Creek, but I remember when everything we saw on TV was filmed in North Carolina.
Absolutely.
What happened? They got a Republican governor who started doing very hardcore right-wing things, and the money and the business left. If we don't think it can leave Georgia, we're not paying attention.
I truly think you can be a linchpin for not only a change in Georgia, but throughout the United States of America. What are the three things we can do and our audience can do to support you to make sure that you...
So that's it. So she just spoke to black men's issues. So for people in this space who want to sit up here and say that Stacey Abrams doesn't speak to black men, she never addressed black men. She has addressed black men. She's addressing 3 black men on their own panel right now. What are we talking about here?
Yeah, no, does this guy really have a PhD?
I don't question it. I mean, if he says he has it, he has it. I mean, the thing here is
the DR stand for like Dominican Republic. We sure? What I heard, it's a lot of political ignorance. I mean, there was more substance in that than, really that you heard in the manosphere, period. Like I said, these guys don't want to talk about issues. They don't want to talk about policies. They want to talk about things that aren't on the ballot.
Yeah.
As MOT says, submission is not on the ballot. Black women are not on the ballot. The girl that turned you down in middle school is not on the ballot. Policies are.
Let's play one last clip, and then we'll drop the link. See if anybody wants to come up. If they don't, we'll pull up out of here. But let's play this clip from MSNBC.
The midterm elections coming up. I want to turn to Georgia, which is on everyone's minds because less than 2 months out from the midterms, and at the center of the conversation among many black men. That rarely happens, and I want to center black men today. Right now, we could be looking at a split ticket. Senator Raphael Warnock is leading in his race against Herschel Walker, but Stacey Abrams is behind Governor Kemp. Now, Abrams says if black men vote for her, she'll win. But the math ain't really math in there. And I know Roland has a lot of thoughts about that. I want to bring into the conversation Cliff Albright. He's the co-founder of Black Voters Matter Fund. And Terrence Woodbury. He's a Democratic pollster and CEO and founding partner of Hit Strategies. Cliff, I do want to start with you since you're on ground there in Georgia. We'll get to the debate between Walker and Warnock in a second. But just being on ground there, Cliff, what do you make of that? Like, are black men large in number enough to decide this race for Stacey Abrams? Or is this just a headline that's, more yellow journalism and sensationalism than truth?
Yeah, good morning, Tiffany. Great to be here with you. Obviously, black males, black men voters make up enough of a block where we can be a part of what the difference is. And we got to keep in mind, we're talking about a state where in the presidential election in 20, the difference was famously those 11,700 votes that Trump was trying to find someplace. So in a situation like that, yeah, black men as a voting bloc can be a big part of the equation. And, whether or not we come out, black men in Georgia come out and support Stacey at the same rate that black women do is a legitimate question. Now certainly black men aren't going to bear the brunt of what happens in this election on their own, no more than black women should bear the brunt of it. Some white folks could have to wake up and actually do the right thing in the state if they wanted to move forward. But I think that it is smart to raise this issue because at the end of the day, and we hate to admit it, but there is some number of black men that will just refuse to vote. It's the sexism, it's the patriarchy that just refuse to vote for a woman, whether that woman is Stacey Abrams or whether it was Hillary Clinton in 16. And that's an issue that we have to address. Again, that's not the majority of us. It's not a plurality of us, but we have to address that, and we have to be willing to call that out and call it what it is.
Yeah. Well, Terrence, you're on ground doing work, doing polling there. And so I think Cliff raises a really good point, which I want to dig into. But Terrence, I want to ask you just for the math part, because I don't know that it's fair to lay this at the feet of black men and say, yeah, you guys cost us the election, because black men overwhelmingly vote Democratic. And so as a pollster, I'm curious your take on this conversation around black male voters in Georgia.
Yeah, thank you for that, Tiffany. The truth is that the Democratic support gap between men and women is not unique to black voters. There's a gender gap amongst all voters where men are more likely to vote conservative. Now, when you look at the math here, Stacey Abrams lost in 2018 by 55,000 votes. Had black men voted for Stacey Abrams at the same rate as black women, she would have had 120,000 more votes.
120,000 more votes. And you have black men in this space who are saying, man, I'd rather just stay home, man. I'd rather sit down with Steve Bannon. You know what I mean? I'd rather sit down with Trump and Brian Kemp and DeSantis. So if you want to know why you don't have reparations, if you want to know why you don't have more economic enfranchisement, if you want to know why you don't have more political capital, look no further than the men of the Black Manosphere. Let me get to one more clip.
Yes. So, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. No. Yeah, that whole clip, you know, like I said, I think it's distorted. Like you said, most black men do vote for the Democratic Party. It seems to be this loud element, at least in this space, that basically tries to create this bigger narrative than it is. And like I said, it looks like they're buying into the small amount of pandering that they get, but at the end of the day, what do they have to show for it?
Yeah.
A secret list of hundreds of thousands of names of people they want to eliminate from the voter rolls. So I shoot down and I happened to encounter at the Ebenezer Baptist Church where Martin Luther King preached. There was the head of the legislature, the Democrats in the Georgia legislature, a woman named Stacy Abrams. And she was holding a press conference. She was already livid because she had registered, dig this, and this is in 14. It's very important to understand this. She was complaining that over 50,000 people had been registered by one of her organizations called New Georgia Project, mostly young people of color, Hispanics, and black kids registered to vote. You have to register in the US to vote. And she submitted the forms and they never put these people on the voter rolls. A Secretary of State named Brian Kemp, this Republican, and he wouldn't put them on the voter rolls. He said, oh, we have to check their addresses. We have to confirm them. And gee, they're going to miss the big Senate race. Now, this is the last Senate race in 6 years ago. And so she said they basically were winning the election by literally refusing to put basically put these registered voters on the registration form so they can't vote. So she was complaining. I said, can I speak to you, Miss Abrams? And I showed her the purge lists, which were even a bigger problem, but it was being completely hidden. She was stunned. She was shocked. She was sickened by it. And I have to tell you, it's a rare politician who actually, because, you know, as I said, it's part of American culture. It's like, well, yeah, everyone does it, whatever. No, she didn't think of that way. She said, what is our Secretary of State doing, trying to eliminate like 500,000 voters from the voter rolls?
And there you have it. So for those in this space who keep asking these questions about, well, why didn't she win? If she was so great, why didn't she win? Now you know why she didn't win. Now you know why black people have a hard time winning elections in Georgia outside of Atlanta.
Yeah, no. It boils down to really, you got pretty good turnout in Metro Atlanta. Really boils down to the rest of the state. People, you know, supporting people who are essentially against their interest, and you got more guys in this space essentially, you know, promoting the craziness. But at the end of the day, it's not really adding up. Like she said, we look at things like expansion of Medicare, Medicaid, you know, constitutional carry, you know, all of these things that, you know, people try to tout as good, sometimes helping Black America. You know, Kemp's governorship, you know, economics, as far as contracts and awards, it's not adding up.
Yeah.
Not adding up at all.
Yeah, if anybody, you know, feels different, please hop up on the panel. I would love to hear anybody defend, you know, the foolery that we heard earlier testimony from another PhD who thinks that aligning yourself with Steve Bannon and the MAGA movement is a great strategy for Black men. You can't make this up, man. Only in the manosphere can you hear things like this.
Yeah, like I said, it's people waving. It's people pretty much waving Confederate flags. Yellow white power, and here you have Black men trying showing up thinking, hey, look, I fit in here as well. They throwing out the white. They're throwing up the white power symbol like George Santos saying, let's do this. I'm like, something's not adding up here, guys.
Yeah. The math ain't mathing. Like Tiffany Cross is saying, the math isn't mathing. How do you make sense of this? You got Black men in here saying you can put, that ADOS movement with, in the hashtag put more pressure on getting reparations than the Congressional Black Caucus has. I mean, you can't make this type of stuff up. Only in the manosphere do you hear this type of stuff. Outside the manosphere, you'll never hear it.
Yeah. The other thing too is I can't remember who it was, but people at one point were talking about before this election, Stacy Abrams, she had about, because she talked about in the interview that she paid off all her debts because I believe she went to law school and to get her public policy degree as well.
Yep.
So I believe she went to Yale Law School, so very expensive. So she had, I want to say, about like $200K in student debt, something like that, or 200. Sizable amount of debt. Like she said, she paid it off in 2019. That's when her basically, she lost the governorship in 2018, but her run and her stardom really shot up. Book deals, appearances. That's how she was able to pay that off. But at the time, there were actually people who were trying to question her being in debt. Were trying to play it into the Black women overspending their money and Black people spending recklessly, this and that. But she paid hers off. But Kemp actually was even in more debt. He was in close to like 800,000, something like that, I believe.
I thought it was $1 million. I thought it was $1 million.
It may have been even $1 million. Yeah. But you didn't hear much made about that. Yet you have Stacey Abrams who's in less than half the amount of debt he was in. She's since paid it off, and people are trying to rag on her about it.
Yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Black men just don't understand how to build political capital. And what you've heard tonight on the onset was somebody who was woefully uninformed about political science and just lack of political literacy in his own discourse. It doesn't matter if he has a PhD or not. That's irrelevant. What's really important is they're selling you this in the manosphere now. This is what's being sold as content creation, content strategy, BMI, whatever that means, body mass index. I don't know. It's a lot of people talking about flat blackness and stuff like that. I mean, it doesn't get more flat black than not knowing what you're talking about when it comes to public policy. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, just to align yourself up with, the MAGA movement and Steve Bannon and say, the Republicans, he's not a traditional Republican. Yeah, because he's a rhino. He's a rhino. That's what that is.
Yeah, no, I agree. Hey, I got one clip. I'm going to drop the link for you to play.
Okay,
I think that'll be a good closing clip. Hold up. Let me get it for 1 second.
Okay. Yeah, links in the chat. If anyone can defend this guy or the rhetoric that was coming from him, please step up. If not, we'll play this last clip and then we'll peel out of here. But anybody subscribe to that sort of rhetoric, man, I have to question, why would you even be over here? Seems like the manosphere has been taking L's all week long, man. A lot of guys taking L's, whether it's on Roland Martin or it's on other channels, other platforms. Guys are getting torn out the frame and looking crazy out here, pushing this rhetoric. How do you get reparations? You use a hashtag. Let the manosphere tell it. If you get a hashtag going, you can get reparations. You can put pressure on people. Pressure on who? Pressure on who? Who are you talking to?
Yeah, it's in the chat.
All right, let me get it now. Share my screen real quick.
Included Dick Gregory, and this included comedians, comics, trumpet players, baseball players. Show me in the white community where a comedian is a white leader. Show me in the white community where a singer is a white leader, or a dancer or a trumpet player is a white leader. These aren't leaders. These are puppets and clowns that have been set up over the white community and over the black community by the white community and have been made celebrities and usually say exactly what they know that the white man wants to hear. And it is an honor, actually, that they endorsed Dr. Martin Luther King and were against the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. That's actually an honor. Now, when you say that they also, in the same Newsweek poll magazine, I think the pollster said that he went into the Negro community and asked about the Muslims. And many Negroes whom he asked said, well, I never heard of the Muslims. Who are they? You know,
this is the rank and file we're talking about.
Oh, yeah. Now, when they got down to the rank and file, this was the answers that they got. This is equivalent to the situation in Kenya during the Mau Mau uprising, when many frightened whites in Kenya, Africa, would go among the Africans and ask them, what about the Mau Mau? And the African would say, I never heard of them. And the same white man who would ask the African this question and very naively believe what the African said, when he went to bed that night, he would lose his head. And usually the one who took his head was the same African who told him that afternoon he had never heard of the Mau Mau.
Except in the Newsweek poll, they used Negro interviewers.
You'll find that oftentimes Negroes are as much on guard around Negro interviewers, who usually represent the bourgeois element of Negroes, as they are on guard around whites. Usually Negroes know that when this bourgeois Negro walks through the door, he is not doing something that he's initiated himself, but he's involved in something in which the white man is the absolute author of and has sent him to the Negro community for some information. And when they give that Negro some information, usually they give him the information that they want him to take back to the white man, because that's who he's going to take it back to.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, when you know, he went to tied in some other things, but the main thing you were saying, hey, that, you know, these people that people look to as celebrity and people to lead them, and you know, essentially going back to, you know, Dr. Ronald Neal, you know, holding up his NWA shirt and talking about, you know, these people are, you know, standing up for black men, you know, and then you know, you got Ice Cube, you know, literally shaking hands with a white nationalist, you know, doing, you know, teaming up with Steve Bannon, trying to do business with the guy, you know, saying, hey, this is good for black people. You know, this is a game that's sort of run, you know, that's sort of run on Black America, is, you know, these people are put, or who have some level of celebrity and cachet, they can basically be used by the political establishment to push their agenda.
Absolutely.
Congress puts laws in place until their numbers come back up. Why can't we do that for the oldest occupation in history for Black people in this country? Which,
yeah.
What do you? How do you come down?
I just think we're so far removed from the event. It was the original sin of the country, and I think let's just make it a more perfect union rather than looking backward, because I don't know where it stops when you do that.
Do you think the idea deserves to be studied further? Some of the 2020 presidential candidates have said that there should be a commission to study the idea.
You know, I'm not there. I want to move. You know, listen, the original sin is real. We've tried to overcome all of our mistakes with the American Indian, you name it. We're not a perfect country, but we're trying to form a more perfect union, and I don't think this helps.
What's your take on the idea of reparations? Do you think that would be a good?
I don't think any person, black or white, is responsible for what someone else, black or white, did 150 years ago. And I think most Americans feel the same way I do. Slavery was reprehensible. It's indefensible. But reparations presents a whole different issue. And I believe in personal responsibility. And I just don't think someone today is responsible for what someone else did 150 years ago.
I don't think reparations for something that happened 150 years ago, for whom none of us currently living are responsible, is a good idea. We've, tried to deal with our original sin of slavery by fighting a civil war, by passing landmark civil rights legislation. We've elected an African-American president. I think we're always a work in progress in this country, but no one currently alive was responsible for that. And I don't think we should be trying to figure out how to compensate for it. First of all, it'd be pretty hard to figure out who to compensate. We've had waves of immigrants as well who've come to the country and experienced dramatic discrimination of one kind or another. So no, I don't think reparations are a good idea.
Yeah. Straight from the mouth. Straight from the horse's mouth. Straight from the horse's mouth, man. And I don't get it. You have guys in this space who are saying cut the check, but who are you talking to? Well, if we use the hashtag, we could put more pressure on reparations. Who are you putting that pressure on? Joe? Who are you putting that pressure on, man? There's no way in the world that we can have a serious conversation by using hashtags in StreamYards. It's just not realistic.
Nah, I agree. Like I said, people who want something but have no knowledge on the political process, no interest in learning how it works, think hashtags, harassing politicians at fish fries, confronting people in the legislature, they think that's the way it's going to work. That's how you get legislation passed.
And claiming to be an independent on top of that, but want to align themselves with the MAGA movement and then say that, guys should sit down and talk with Steve Bannon. I've heard a lot of things in my time in the manosphere, but this is some of the most damning evidence, testimony I've heard in a very long time. This is my first time ever hearing testimony like this coming from a black man's mouth, that they should sit down and work with white nationalists, white extremists, because the Democratic Party hasn't talked to black men, even though we just played 30 minutes of Stacy Abrams right from her own mouth, her own testimony on her credentials and what she plans on doing if she was elected. If black men actually voted their numbers, they would have had 120,000 votes, which would have catapulted her into office, and we would have got a lot of things done. But you got these black men in here who are saying, I'd rather stay home than to actually vote, and then complain later about why they don't have reparations. You can't make this up.
Yeah. Not like I said, that, or people who are saying, voting is there's no purpose for voting. As I was listening to someone today, they were saying, if voting doesn't make a difference, go look at like a wealthy suburb and see what the percentage of people, what the voter turnout is there. It's probably going to be pretty high. But people run around and say voting doesn't matter.
No, of course, and the idea here is to, vote anything but blue, but complain later about the outcome of not getting anything when you, when you stay home. So I'll give this another 2 or 3 minutes. If nobody shows up on the panel, man, we'll peel out of here. But you can watch the replay if you're just now coming in here. And what I'll say to you here is that Black men have had the ability to engage in politics, and they just they're just refusing to follow up the process for what it is.
Yeah, no, and the funny thing is people will to that point, people will point to other minority groups. They'll point to the LGBT community, they'll point to the Hispanic community, some will point to women. They'll talk about, all these groups get something. I mean, Black people or Black men get nothing. I'm like, yeah, all those groups are organized in some form or fashion. There's political organizations, they have people representing them, they have nonprofits, they have scholarship, they have all sorts of resources that are there. They have Black Women's Roundtable. You've seen with the LGBT community how they are organized. Women, there's all sorts of stuff across when you start talking about gender, whether it be scholarships, nonprofit advocacy, all of those things, just general awareness. And I'm like, but none of that stuff occurred by them saying, hey, I'm not going to participate in the process, or hey, I'm going to walk away and someone's going to come begging me to come back. That's not how this works. People had to roll up the sleeves, they had to organize, they had to do the groundwork. Stacy Abrams, like she said, she founded Fair Fight Georgia. She founded the Georgia Voter Project. And that's what really laid the groundwork for her to run and have a competitive campaign in 2018 and 2022.
Well, what's interesting too is that the Black Male Voter Project came out of the New Georgia Project.
Yeah. People don't want to talk about that either.
Yeah. Here it is right here. Let me share my screen real quick, and that'll probably be the last thing we cover. We had to make this long because we had to listen to people who, what's going on with this? Here we go right here, run by Mondale Robinson, who's a mayor of Endicott, North Carolina. What's going on here? Everybody else is organizing. You come to the Manosphere and there's no organization at all. What does it say here? What we do. While Black Male Voter Project is the only national organization focused solely on increasing Black men's participation in electoral politics, we do have 17 priority states. In these states, we run our full BMEP aditory approach campaigns, which includes digital targeting, our club ambassador program, phone banking, peer-to-peer texting, and relational organizing. Okay. Our goal is to make more than 300 million voter attempts targeting Black men in an effort to close the voter gap with Black women and Black men from 10% to 4%. Okay. Our impact, Black Male Voter Project's impact on 2020 elections can be defined as nothing less than innovative, polls defying and badass rethinking of how we run effective editorial campaigns in this country, with direct voter engagement to every Black man in our 17 priority states. We did not begin after Labor Day, but at the beginning of the year and continue throughout. And as a result, we saw increased participation across the board in the demographic that pundits and pollsters said would sit this election out. We prioritized what we knew was important to Black men and built programs and around these issues. trades back in schools, ending cash bail, and putting an end to qualified immunity. That's what you get when you organize. And what you have in the manosphere is disorganization. Guys talking about using StreamYards to fight, to knock on doors and whatnot. I don't know what these guys are thinking. Sitting down with, Steve Bannon and the MAGA movement and hoping to get some considerable change out of it.
Yeah. The Manosphere meetup is not going to cut it for organizing and planning and strategizing. You got to actually, do the groundwork and actually get people interested and behind some legislation and support consistently.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You're not going to get anywhere with that. So that's where we are right now. I see nobody's coming up to defend, the lunacy behind aligning yourself up with Republicans and name only MAGA movement, Steve Bannon, guys who stormed the Capitol, all these child support, fighters who want to stick to their guns and fight child support, from StreamYards, but don't want to get on the ground and organize. Links in the chat. Links in the chat. Come defend this. If not, we'll just peel out of here, man. Black History Month, and you don't see any content from these guys about Black history as it stands, man. Can't make this up.
Yeah. No, I don't. Like I said, I don't think we're gonna get anyone. These guys, like I said, you start bringing facts, things like that. People get silent. People want to stay in the chat, or listen from the clouds, or not address it altogether. So, I don't see much, but No. We need actually. I don't know if anybody mentioned it, but yes, started Black History Month. Was actually participating in something at work, a history event. So several things on the docket there. I'm sure we'll have a few things centered around a few streams centered around Black history. Maybe pick a few themes, few industries, or just general history, things that things about. Things you would have never guessed that Black people were involved in help founding or played a role in that you weren't taught in your grade school coming up. So that's all I got.
Hey, thanks for joining the panel, and thanks to everyone else who hit the like button. If you have not hit the like button already, please do so on your way out and share the video if possible, and hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust.